Works better if you turn the mic on, right? Everybody hear me in the back there? All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and happy holidays. Merry Christmas to all of you. This is our final meeting of the year, unless something comes up that I don't know about. So what we're going to do is start our today's efforts with the public forum, as we do every time before our regular meeting. And this is an opportunity for people to testify and provide input to the board on issues related to TriMet or anything that's on the agenda today. We allocate 45 minutes, and we have a sign-up sheet that's outside of the door. First come, we'll bring them on first. We try to limit the testimony because there's usually a number of folks who want to testify. However, this morning, I see that there's only 2 people who've signed up to testify.
Is that just for the public hearing?
Oh, that's the ordinance, excuse me. Thank you. Let me start over again here. We have 4. We'll still be fine. So what I'd like to do is ask you to keep your remarks to 3 minutes. If you have any other information that we need to have, you can provide us written testimony. But again, I think we're doing pretty well for time. I'd like to use the time to get into the agenda because we have a long agenda and we're going to be here most of the day. So with that, I'm going to call up the folks 2 at a time. And we have Pete Colt and David Bouchard.
I go first?
You bet. Good morning.
All right. Good morning.
The only one up here, so yes, you will go first.
Right. Good morning, directors. My name is David Bouchard. I am here representing Bus Riders Unite, which is a division of Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. And today I wanted to talk to you about the memorandum that you will be reviewing later today regarding how to implement the HB 2777 legislation. I will say that right now we are definitely pleased that TriMet is moving in the right direction when it comes to fair enforcement. The tiered system is a good start. The fact that you have 90 days to pay before it goes to court is also a good start. However, there are 2 things that I have a concern about, and so do our other members. The first thing is the initial fine, with the $75 fine. A lot of us at community groups were hoping to have a lower fine. We were hoping to have a $50 fine. We think that that is a reasonable fine for first-time evaders. It's still $50. It's not something to trifle with, but it isn't so high that it really becomes a problem. And especially when you consider that the next fine up is like $90. So you're only looking at a $15 difference there. So we think that a lower fine would be great, even if it were, say, 60. Something, because it's at least, there's a bigger gap there between the 2 fines, and it would be, it just wouldn't be so high. And we know that one of the reasons that you recommended it is because of the data that you received. There was about 30-something% of people who you recorded as people who, quote, chanced the fair. I believe that data should be re-examined because there could be instances where people said they chanced it, but they didn't really want to say that they couldn't afford it because maybe it's just hard for them to really admit that, or maybe they're chancing it because their budget is so tight that they're choosing between buying fare or buying some food for the night at the grocery store. So we really urge you to relook at that and really look, consider adopting a lower first-time fine. The other three tiers are not such an issue, but that first one is definitely problematic. Also, can I?
Please go.
Yeah, okay.
Please continue.
Yeah. So also one other thing, there's no reinstatement of a warning system, and I understand that this is probably, I'm sure probably staff had thought about that, and I know the fare evasion rate was really high back in the early 2010s, 20% or more, but there's a really good benefit to having a warning system. It helps to establish more trust, because if let's say it's your first time, you just got into town, you were new to the system, you were staying with a friend, it's your very first time using the system, maybe you forgot to tap your hop card, or like my case, I had a couple days where my hop card wasn't working, it wasn't accepting my transaction, even though I had the money in the bank to do it, it just wasn't working. It does now, but there are always instances, if you maybe have trouble loading the fare, you just forgot to activate the ticket, maybe the train just arrived and you didn't have time to find the reader. A warning for a first time offense, I think, is reasonable, and I would really like to see some investigation into that and to see what you can do to implement that. And that's really all I have. This is a really good first step. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this. We thank you for, I want to thank Eric for meeting with us a few weeks ago. He was very receptive. He listened. He was reasonable for the most part. So I would say, let's just keep up the good work. Let's keep working together and come up with a fair ordinance that is fair to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good comments. And for anybody watching at home, we have the staff giving us a presentation on kind of the elements of the new administrative fare enforcement program that the legislature gave us that we asked for. I think it is going to be a good improvement. And so if I got this right, you're asking for a lower initial fee and take a look at it, seeing if we have can reinstate a warning citation or whatever it is in it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we'll have a dialogue about those issues when we get into that, I'm sure. So thank you for your input.
Thank you very much.
Is Pete Colt not here?
And they're talking about ordinance 347, but they want to talk during public.
Okay, all right. Well, then the next two are Evan Moore and Charles Orniske, I can't pronounce the last name here, but Ormsby, that's what it is. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Mr. Ormsby, are you here? Oh yeah, there he is. Great.
Should I start while he comes in?
Please go. Yeah,
All
you're
right.
fine.
All right. Good morning, directors. My name is Avon, and I'm also a member of Bus Riders Unite, Opal Environmental Justice. I am, can you hear me okay?
You bet.
Sounds weird. So I'm also here to comment on the memo. I think it's great that you're moving forward with changing the way that you do fare evasion citations. I'm also really looking forward to the low-income fare later in the program. I want to echo David on this. I do think that there's a lot of space for looking into reinstating the warning system and for having a lower fare. And one of the first things that sort of jumped out at me when I was looking at the 2017 fare evasion survey results is that it seems like the entire, with the exception of the encouraging people to enroll in low-income fare or honored citizen programs, it seems like the entire purpose of the citation as it's set is to capture less than a third of the people who are riding without fare. And I feel like there's, if you look at your own data, it looks like there's a lot of reasons that people would be riding without a fare that would be better addressed with a warning system, or at least with, a less punitive fare. if you look at, the second most common reason, it's forgot to validate mobile app ticket, 27%, which is kind of interesting because later in the memo, this is cited as sort of knowingly riding without fare, but the question as it appears to have been phrased is forgot, as in like not knowingly, something to look into, I think. And then you've got people, riding without an ID, people who thought it was valid, people who forgot to validate their paper ticket. It just seems like a first-time warning would be more appropriate for the majority of quote-unquote offenders in this system. There's something else that I wanted to highlight about this, which is community service is great as long as if it's intended as an alternative to a punitive system, community service is great. But I think you'd have to look into what kind of community service people are doing, because I think if you're cleaning up sidewalks for the Portland Business Alliance, that effectively is a punishment. It's not necessarily contributing to your community. It's doing unpaid labor as punishment for the crime of riding without a fare. I think you'd be looking at a lot more positivity around a community service program if it were something like being able to volunteer at a nonprofit that provided direct services to members of the community. That's pretty much all I had to say. I just think that it's really worth looking at the actual, data that you're getting out of the survey and trying to figure out what it means for the majority of riders who are a part of this system that you're creating.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ormsby, sorry I couldn't read your name there.
No problem. Thank you very much, TriMet Board of Directors. My name is Charles Ormsby. I go by the nickname Skip. I live in Clackamas County within the Lake Oswego Urban Growth Management Area on the northeast quadrant of Lake Oswego. Our community, Birds Hill CPO&A, straddles both Highway 43 and the Willamette shoreline, which TriMet owns. I'm here on a number of matters that have arisen, some in the last 24 hours, some in the last 8 weeks. It is quite concerning. First off, I want to say this is the first time I've been in this building in about 40 years, a slight difference from what it was. Memorable machine here at that time was a printer and had one of the most key instructions that's kept my digits intact through industrial engineering and manufacturing engineering of aircraft. And it said, there's a quote from Rudyard Kipling it was put on the line printer at that time, right above the print surface. It said, who knows what evil lurks in the heart of this machine? So just a waypoint here. My mother is in the back of this room. She's age 103.4. She'll be 103 and a half at the end of January of 2018. Anyway, let me get into my issues here. House Bill 2017, I've noticed your packet. It does touch on a number of things. There needs to be a higher degree of integration on the west side of the west bank of the Willamette River, because my neighbor is going to be dead set in the target zone of that because of the potential tolling on I-5 and I-205. It brings up a number of issues that are currently evolving. Most notably, that motivated me to come to this meeting today is the issue of the intersection of Highway 43 and B Avenue in Lake Oswego. This is MAW point 6.04, and Highway 43 is what I will refer to. It's also known as State Street. The problem for TriMet right now, and has been since 1983, is the transition of southbound buses of TriMet around that corner on the northwest corner of that intersection to the Lake Oswego Transit Center, which became operational 1984 January. A lot of concern about that at that time in the Lake Oswego Council. They were not really involved in that process, according to the minutes I've read from 1983. For the first time in TriMet's history, that corner is owned by the city of Lake Oswego. Frankly, they've not communicated with TriMet planners and ODOT to my personal satisfaction to enable safe turning of buses around that corner. Currently, it's a 20-foot radius, I believe, and it should be increased to accommodate your new fleet things of TriMet buses and potentially articulated buses. On that corner, Lake Oswego wants to put what they call a boutique hotel with age-restricted apartments, essentially to keep, quote, the riffraff out of Lake Oswego, the low-income people. So that needs to be addressed immediately. They're on a fast track. They're on a mission, frankly, and I won't say what it's a mission. They want to get it going. They're doing every shortcut of every citizen involvement process. TriMet needs to step in and educate them immediately. I cannot understate this. I will complain to whatever government agency it takes, FHWA, everybody, all the way to Congress. I am incensed at the lack of their coordination, the lack of their understanding of TriMet vernacular, and a whole host of other issues, and frankly, their disrespect of lower income people such as myself. I'm an X number of heartbeats away from being out of my mother's house of some odd 60 years. Also, our neighborhood needs to communicate with TriMet better and have a citizens advisory committee with the Willamette shoreline. Issues have evolved in California in the last 2 weeks, especially with wildfires. I'm hyper concerned with this. In short, how do you do fire protection on that line? And also the railroad line through Lake Oswego as well. To demonstrate some of these things, I want a bus rodeo of TriMet administrators, board, Lake Oswego City Council, Clackamas, whoever it takes, to impart the knowledge of what TriMet bus drivers go through in making that turn. Bus stop configuration report, make it active on your thing. Also, I need spec sheets of TriMet vehicles, again, to communicate TriMet vernacular to planning entities, to neighborhoods, and align that vernacular with land use and transportation issues. They're also on line 35, if you don't know, Clackamas County wants to build a new circuit court to replace an 80-year-old building. I'm just sort of giving you notice. I think the Oregon City Transit Center is going to have to be moved from its current location up to the Red Solis District campus area, because what's going to be left in downtown Oregon City, and also as an example trip for the legal community from the Oregon State Bar on Southwest on Cruiseway in Lake Oswego to the Red Solis District Clackamas County headquarters currently requires about 2 hours. I don't think a lot of people in the legal community would like that, and I'm just saying stuff should be addressed in that when that is relocated, especially for the people that will attend that building, and a number of services that will have to be moved out of what is referred to as downtown Oregon City up to that campus area. That is not being considered in the integration of the plans on this, especially in the House bill enabling that legislation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. That's a lot of information you passed.
I'll have to put this in writing.
Please do. That would be very helpful.
It's
You covered a lot of
and I do want some follow up on some of these things. It's
Yeah.
I haven't been at a TriMet board meeting in about 6 months, but a lot of stuff has evolved in the last 3 months, and it's overwhelming to me myself. Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate some of that in writing. That'd be very good. Thank you for coming this morning. I appreciate it. All right, the next two are Greg Baker and Matt Cato.
One more.
Yeah, one.
Counselor
All right.
Sanchez during public forum.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Matt Cato. I'm Director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace for the Archdiocese of Portland. It's the social justice element of our Catholic faith. Please indulge me as I start by a quote from Pope Francis. The quality of life in cities has much to do with systems of transport. Many specialists agree on the need to give priority to public transportation. Yet some measures needed will not prove easily acceptable to society unless substantial improvements are made in the systems themselves. A new low-income fare program is one such substantial improvement. Transit is a great leveler. Transit is colorblind. Rich and poor benefit from mass transit, but poverty is not a great leveler. Poverty is not colorblind. No one benefits from poverty. We have more than 14% in our area who are poor. Unless you're Latino, then that's 22%. Unless you're black, then that's 27% who are poor. So for many who are poor, mass transit is the only way for them to get to work, to community college, to grocery stores, to doctors. They ride our buses because they are bus dependent. And when you're counting pennies, every dollar matters a lot. Cutting the cost of adult single-use and day passes in half can save a struggling family a lot of money. For them, it's a lot of money. And I applaud this program. It's an excellent start. I hope that you can extend that to the monthly pass, the same discount. I especially commend you for setting the standard at 200% of the federal poverty level. The federal poverty level is a half-century-old, outdated model that bears no resemblance to what it really costs to live. So again, every penny counts, and when you're giving the poor who are bus dependent a break and letting them save $1 a day, $2 a day, you're making a significant difference. So I ask you please to adopt this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Greg Baker. Is the show on? Can you hear that? I'm the executive director of the Blanchet House of Hospitality, and I echo and support what was just stated in terms of these bus passes. As you know, the Blanchet House has been in this community for some 66 years, and we have been feeding the poor and taking care of the poor, housing the poor, and making certain that these men who graduate from our programs can go forward. We work with some 7,000 volunteers and do some 330,000 meals each and every year. It is very, very difficult often for us to see the individuals on the street and know that the future for those individuals may be a long time coming. And so what we try to do is to help them through transitional living, to get a restart, to better improve their lives so that they can go forward and be productive citizens. We work with some 58 men downtown in our clean and sober facilities, and we have 22 men in our farm out in Yamhill County. We have case managers who help to change lives through a life plan. We use your services in terms of bus fare to get our guys back and forth to work. As you may or may not know, the recent statistics say that in the city of Portland, some 4,100 people are now on the streets publicly. And if you've read the HUD's latest report, this is at a relative cost of about $40,000 per person. That's $161 million that we have on the street and we're supporting as taxpayers. And so part of our concern here is that we're asking people to look at this and see how we can remove these individuals from the street, help them to find adequate housing, jobs, and places to live and get a restart. What you're doing in this community by providing any transportation is very, very important. But I urge you to continue to do that and to visit with agencies like ours so that you can understand a little bit better how this works and what the impact is truly on these individuals that you're making these passes available for. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for coming. Appreciate it. Your work in the community is very valued, and thank you.
Personal invitation, Merry Christmas to all of you, and please come over and have lunch with me.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. All right, I have two more, Maria Hernandez, and then I have Councilor Sam Chase from Metro, and I had you sign it, thought you might be testifying later, but I think you're coming up now, is that correct? See him coming up, all right.
Hi all. I finally got Maria right. Last time I was Mario. Anyways, my name is Maria Hernandez. I'm the advocacy coordinator at Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. By now you should know that Opal works with low-income folks and organizes individuals to take action for what are the issues that impact them in the first place. In addition, man, this is weird. In addition, you also know that when solutions come from community and develop a sense of collaboration between TriMet and just generally any institution or stakeholder involved in the process, good solutions come out of that. And I actually want to take a second and applaud TriMet, and more specifically give thanks to Eric, who has been engaging folks when it comes to the House Bill 2777 in the right way. And I'm here today in addition to applauding TriMet for accepting the recommendation of House Bill 2777 that came out of Bus Riders Unite and among other leaders and other members of community, to add the work group who is now looking into the process of what this new fair administrative system could look like. I'm here to ask you all to follow through and and recognize that when you involve community, you must involve community all the way to the process of implementation. Proposals that come from community are oftentimes overlooked when it comes to the development, and when it comes to the implementation, they are left behind. Our members and communities, we've been engaging them for quite a while now, and we recognize that what comes out of the work group is a huge, huge step, and we are very happy. Can it go farther? Absolutely. So I won't echo as much as what has already been said, but I'm here to ask you all that as you look at this proposal, you look at the proposal that comes from community, by community, and that it will be for community. As mentioned, transit riders don't only depend on you, depend on the system, they depend on it for livelihood. So it's not something that they have a choice to just say, I'm not gonna use transit today, etc. So lastly, like I said, I wanna take into consideration the timing, but I will submit my written comments, because I also have other comments in regards to House Bill 2017, and also in regards to the oversight committee that you're looking into that process. So again, please consider the recommendation that comes, the proposal on House Bill 2777 that comes from community. And I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to that process. But again, thank you, and thank you, Eric, and thank you to all the community who really put analysis and feedback to this proposal. And I think a new proposal can be even better for TriMet to actually take the lead and follow through all the way through. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Counselor.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Sam Chase with Metro Council, and I really just wanted to take a minute to talk about the low-income fare work that you have been doing, and would start with saying we are a thriving region. We have a fantastic quality of life. We have a very strong economy, but not for everybody. A lot of folks don't have access to that economy and that quality of life, and creating more low-cost fares allows people to get around that region more effectively, people to get to work, to access that quality of life, to access the services they need. And you have stepped up, and I really want to thank Bruce Warner and Neil McFarland, John Gardner, everybody at TriMet, the board, for supporting and really engaging in this process. Metro's job is to help support you in that work, and we are charged with helping make sure that transit is one of the fundamental components of our regional transportation strategy, and so want to support you as much as we can, continuing to move forward. Your leadership has been fantastic on this. As this program launches, want to be as helpful as possible in making sure that we are getting the word out to folks, that folks are there, that folks are getting signed up, that folks are aware of this program, and that we're maximizing the number of people that get to take advantage of the really great work that you are doing here on this program.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come, and thank you for your efforts on this too. I know you spent a lot of time at the task force with all of us, and spent a lot of time, I know, outside of that down in Salem. So again, thank you for making it a reality. It's nice to be here. All right, that concludes all who, whoops, just a moment.
Annalise Kohler
Yes?
and the TIAC group would like to speak now.
Like to speak now, all right. So I guess we'll call up Annalise Kohler, and is there others also want to come up? Why don't you come on up? I don't think I have. Are you Matt? Nope. Okay, why don't you come on up too?
I can go first. Hello, everyone. My name's Larry Hale, and I come here in a unique position because I was a former transit official. I used to work for the city of Boston in the MBTA in their accessibility department. And I'd say I started traveling to Portland 2 years ago. Well, not 2 years ago, in 2002. And I remember my experience then. I was trying to find a hotel. I got down to Pioneer Square. There was a supervisor who helped me out after he saw that I had trouble. He would have even went above and beyond to help me actually take me to my hotel, but because I needed to figure it out on my own, he followed the bus that I took. When I got off the bus, he gave me the assistance I needed to locate the hotel and the bus I needed to get back into the city. And I bring this up to talk about this whole aspect of customer service. In the MBTA, for years, we've had the tagline driven by customer service. And I think back to that situation in 2002, and I remember that was one of the reasons why I had fallen in love with TriMet and the city of Portland. That type of help that I got was completely unparalleled. Fast forward to when there was a move to create the there was a shift toward really looking at trying to collect the fares, and I got the feeling as though it was a little harmful toward customers. And I do understand the importance of really making sure that you get the revenue, because that helps toward operating costs and things like that. But as people said, sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. The fare machines don't work, or there may be card issues. So it's my hope that you will consider what everyone has been talking about as it relates to the low-income fare. But I really want to touch on that whole customer service aspect, really focusing on making sure that customers feel welcome to take the system. When we treat, sometimes there's an unintended one to, because we're trying to collect the fares, we sometimes look and treat the customers as these people who don't want to pay the fare. That's not necessarily the case. Really encourage you guys to really look toward that aspect of customer service, and in all aspects. How operators deal with customers, how even people who work in the corporate office deal with customers, really working to ensure access. It's my hope that as you kind of go forward, you listen to what everyone has been saying about the low-income fare, and look at TriMet as a whole, and look at ways to ensure that everyone has a good ride and that everyone feels welcomed on the system. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Really do.
Good morning, TriMet Board of Directors. My name is Annalisa Curler, and I work for Oregon Food Bank. I also serve as the chair of TIAC. I am here today to express Oregon Food Bank's overwhelming support for the implementation of a low-income fare by TriMet. Oregon Food Bank's mission is to end hunger and its root causes. We work statewide to distribute food to Oregonians experiencing hunger through a network of food banks, food pantries, and emergency meal sites. Last year, that network distributed over 100 million pounds of food to an estimated 740,000 people. You may wonder why the food bank is coming to talk to you about transit. Transportation is a key issue for many of the people we serve, and many of them rely on public transportation to get to where they need to go. They use your buses and MAX lines to get to work, to doctor's appointments, to the grocery store, and to our food pantries. The two main concerns we hear from clients regarding transit are the cost of a bus pass and the desire for increased service to their neighborhoods. For example, a client in Rockwood told us they plan their trips to the grocery store around when they already know they're going to be out and about and utilizing a bus pass. The reality of this is that they tell us they often go 2 to 3 weeks between grocery store trips. Clients from a school pantry in David Douglas tell us they use their bikes to balance and carry food boxes 1.5 miles home from a pantry because they cannot afford a bus fare. This low-income fare will significantly reduce the cost for riding the bus for the families we serve. It will free up much-needed dollars to be spent on important items like food, utility bills, medical costs, and rent. I know that at least $72 of monthly savings may not sound a lot to many Oregonians, but to Oregonians experiencing hunger, it's significant. It's a week worth of groceries or an energy bill. I also spend a lot of my time advocating for various programs to help Oregonians experiencing hunger. I spend time down in Salem and here locally talking to legislators and government officials about various anti-hunger and anti-poverty programs. We talk to them about housing assistance, homelessness programs, energy assistance, food programs. And so while there is a lot more that can be done, I also want to say that this is a very robust assistance program. Eligibility guidelines of 200% of the federal poverty level and up to a 70% reduction in fare is substantial. We really appreciate TriMet's commitment to creating a program that works to serve so many Oregonians struggling to make ends meet and also recognizes the need for such considerable assistance. Thank you. And we urge that when the time comes, you adopt this low-income fare program.
Look at that time.
I know.
Thank you very much. I'm impressed. and thanks for what you do also. It's great. Thanks. That actually concludes, I believe, the public forum. I have nobody else who's signed up. Again, I want to thank you all for coming and presenting today. I will point out also for everybody watching us at home that the last item on our agenda is Ordinance 347, which is the ordinance that would, when passed, would allow us to implement the low-income fare program. So we have first reading today, and then the next business meeting we'll actually look at taking action on that unless we have substantive changes to the ordinance. So that's the process, and we are really looking forward to this low-income fare program for the benefit of folks in the region. All right, with that, I'm going to call to order the regular business meeting of the TriMet Board of Directors for December 13th, 2017. And the first items on our regular agenda are board reports. And the first item is the Committee on Accessible Transportation, or CAT as we call it. Director Bauman.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm going to give you a report on the CAT meeting, which occurred on November 15th. The CAT had a very full agenda that day. I'll quickly review the items that were addressed in that meeting. First, there was a transit police report, an update on transit police activity, including upcoming events and responses by Lieutenant Andrew in response to CAT's questions. Next was a presentation by Jesse Stemler on the Division Transit Project, and in particular, the CAT ad hoc committee that addressed accessibility of the articulated bus design. We had a very robust conversation about how to make the new articulated buses as accessible as possible. Then Jennifer Kuzer gave a presentation about the extension of the MAX Red Line in Beaverton and Hillsborough and the addition of a second track at Gateway and at the airport. Hello, is it still working? Marilyn Pemblad gave a report on MAX operator procedures for boarding customers. Kathy Miller gave an update on the use of the hop card on Lyft and reviewed a proposed outreach plan. There was a report on Lyft service performance in September and October. And finally, there was a presentation about ergonomics related to changes in bus passenger seats that have occurred in the most recent procurements. And that's the report.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Director Bauman? Appreciate the report, and thank you. Sounds like you had a very robust meeting with a lot of issues. Yes. The next item on our agenda is the Transit Equity Advisory Committee. Director Bethel usually provides that. He's, I believe, getting another well-deserved award by the community here this morning, so he can't be here right at the moment. So I understand that we have a good stand-in from the TX. So if you could give us a report, please.
Certainly. Thank you, President Warner and members of the board. Just a quick update on what happened in November at the TAC meeting. We discussed meeting logistics. We're planning to move our regular meeting to Center Street, mostly because it's better situated for the TIAC members. It's closer to more public transportation options and has more ADA considerations as well, and easier for some of our members who use Lyft. So that is begin this month, and people are pretty excited about it. Carl Green, our new Title VI program, Title VI and Equity Program Administrator, walked TIAC through the FY19 service changes and the Title VI draft Title VI analysis he performed, as well as the approach he's going to be, or was using to perform the Title VI analysis for the low-income fare program. We did a debrief on our transportation summits that we held in Gresham, Beaverton, and Clackamas. The focus of those was to get feedback on how HOP implementation was going, but also some input on the program design for the new low-income fare program, as well as the administrative hearing process, which went very well. We attracted about 40 or so community-based organizations across the 3 different meetings. And we also talked about new member recruitment. We have 2 TIAC members transitioning off, and so we want to make sure we have a good representation from the Tri-County area, but also from organizations and folks who are either transit-dependent or serving transit-dependent communities. So it was a very good conversation, and we're having our next meeting tomorrow evening. So overall, all in all, good.
Any questions for John Gardner, by the way?
Sorry.
On the report? Okay. Thank you, John. Very much appreciate it. All right, let's move on to the next one is the Accountability Committee. Dr. Bethel usually provides us an update there, and I understand our General Counsel is going to provide us an update from the last meeting.
Yes, thank you, President Warner and board members. The Accountability Committee's last meeting was on Friday, December 1st, where we reviewed statistics from the Transparency and Accountability website. We looked at comparables between October 2016 to the website's statistics from October 2017. So we looked at a month-to-month comparison over the last year. There were 838 page views at the Accountability Center in October 2017 compared to 638 in October of 2016, which is a 21% increase over the previous year. The top 10 most viewed pages, starting from the highest, was the Public Records Request page, followed by Ridership and Performance Statistics, the Performance Dashboard, the TriMet Board of Directors Meetings Schedule, the 2018 Adopted Budget, TriMet's Labor Contract, TriMet's 2017 Audited Financial Statements, its executive team members, the agency org chart, and the Public Records Request Log. Those were the top 10. Committee member Dave Whipple provided a report to the committee on some wonderful upcoming changes to TriMet.org, which will be debuted in 2018. Specifically, it will make it a lot easier for our riders to navigate through from their mobile phones, our website, and use our trip planning tools and Transit Tracker. We also received a report from internal auditor and accountability committee member Darlene Gastineau and paralegal Chris Connor, who administers our ethics point hotline. And while there were 5 reports to the ethics hotline in 2017, none of them was a type 1 report of fraud, waste, or abuse of TriMet resources. Rather, they were all type 2 reports, which properly belong in and were forwarded to other departments for review and investigation, for example, human resources. Our next accountability committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, June 15th, 2018. That's it. If the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Good. Any questions for Shelley Devine, our General Counsel? Seeing none, thank you very much. It's helpful. All right, let's move on then to the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, or MPAC. Director Prosser.
Easy report. MPAC has not met since our last meeting, so I have nothing to report.
All right. Well, then why don't we ask you to continue on to the Finance and Audit Committee?
Actually, that one is also pretty easy.
There we go. All right.
The Finance and Audit Committee normally meets the hour before this meeting, and it was preempted today for an executive session. So we will, in fact, be meeting tomorrow. So we'll have double report next board meeting, I guess.
All right. Any questions for Director Prosser? Okay, seeing none. Let's move on to the General Manager's report. Mr. General Manager.
Board President, members of the board, and everybody, happy holidays to you all. I wanted to first cover a few statistics about ridership. We just got these in, so I can't say that we've dug into them quite the way we normally do, given that our meeting is a little bit earlier in the month than typical. But in November, we carried about 7,775,000 trips on TriMet. But I would tell you, our overall weekly ridership was down to about 2.8% compared to November of last year. So we're sort of looking into the where and how and what the characteristics of the month may have been that affected that. What was unusual was they actually saw a decrease in max peak hour ridership, which has not been the trend that we've been following so far. We also saw fewer people using our frequent service bus lines. Weekly ridership on those services dropped 2.9%. The bright spot was, of course, the Orange Line, which saw an increase of about 2% over last year. So again, we'll continue to dig into these ridership. I think it's the same general trends that we reviewed with you at your retreat last month. But again, those are troubling numbers at some level. So we'll be making sure that we understand them fully. I would just note that I think, and Doug Kelsey will go through performance of the system. It actually has been improving. So again, I think these are really interesting numbers for us to dig into. I have a number of other updates that I would like to invite some of our staff up to provide you. One is we had a very important announcement related to our HOP FastPass system yesterday. Chris Tucker, could you come forward, please? And I think you have a general update for the board, and you can also fill us in on the improvements that that you announced yesterday.
You looked good on TV yesterday, too.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, President Warner and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be back. So yes, the good news continues with HOP. Is there a PowerPoint being fired up? Not yet. While she's firing it up, I'll go ahead and continue. We have hit about 10% of all rides using HOP, and that's a pretty important milestone for us. I was speaking to a peer agency on the East Coast who launched a system many, many years ago, and they still haven't reached 10% adoption rate. We did it in the first 5 months. And I think that's a testament to the system and the support that we've had to design and implement this. We have hit about 50,000 actively used HOP cards, and that's also important for us from a key milestone. We've had over 2 million taps on the system and over $3 million in fare revenue. I think another important metric for me is that the call center remains very quiet. So this is a good news story that the system is intuitive and that the riders are able to self-service and it meets their needs. And they're out there advocating for us as we continue to see a very steady growth of the system. I would also note that the hardware has been extremely reliable. So through the 105-degree days last summer and the frigid winters with ice and snow, the validators that the customers tap have remained exceptionally reliable. The real only issues we have are vandalism occasionally, but other than that, they've been solid and very reliable for the public. I wished I could show you the graph because it's pretty impressive as that HOP adoption grows.
We do have a.
Oh, good.
Has a copy of that.
Okay, great. So for the retail network, I'm pleased to announce we're at over 350 retail stores that are now open to date, and convenience stores are traditionally difficult to get into, and those would be the 7-Elevens and Plaid Panthers of the world to sell transit fares. But I'm pleased to report that they're both loading money now. That's over 200 stores throughout the region, which is very exciting. This is enabling us to now transition and start removing paper fares from the retail stores starting in February of 2018. So that allows folks to not buy the paper pass at the store, but instead buy the HOP card at the store and then add money to that and start using it right away. I'd also mention that we are in lane for reloads now, which means that you can take your HOP card at a Safeway or Albertsons or any of these convenience stores and just check out and add the money and walk out and start using it right away. Fred Meyer's, we are not there yet. So Fred Meyer's, you still load money at the customer service counter. We're hoping to get that in place by April of 2018. The national brand Kroger needs to make a point of sale change, so we're working with them to make that happen. I would also note that 7-Eleven is now, they're going to start testing card sales in their stores in 4 locations, so we're really, really pleased about that as well. So now we've got a PowerPoint, which is great. Let's see. There we go. So that was the graph that I was referencing for the adoption rate. Here's the retail slide, which I'm wrapping up. We should be in 500 plus retail stores by spring of 2018. That would include adding retailers like Rite Aid and Winco. And just as, if you know of anyone at the post office, like the postmaster, let us know, because we're trying to get in there as well. So if anyone has any good connections, please give me a call. The ability to pay with your phone has been popular. So with to date, you've been able to buy an adult fare by tapping your phone with Android Pay, Apple Pay, or Samsung Pay. We've hit 3% of all taps are using that for our customers. That doesn't sound like much, but it is significantly higher than anywhere else in the nation. So our riders have really likened this simplicity of tapping and writing. When London rolled this out, they went from a 98% adoption rate of smart cards. They rolled out open payments within a few years. It's now 40% of all of their rides are coming from the ability to just pay with a bank card, phone, or in your wallet. So that's really pretty exciting. But the really exciting news, which you heard, came out yesterday. And TriMet has teamed up with Google to be the first in the world to support a virtual hop card inside of Android Pay. We start beta testing within a few weeks. This is really significant. We talked about this as technology we were exploring years ago, and the hope was that we could take that physical card and put it in a phone. And it seems so simple. We should just be able to do it. But to break that barrier, and be able to make that happen with Google and Init and Movil has been a huge success. And I assure you, transit agencies around the world will be clamoring for this technology. So we're pleased to bring it to the public. The testing we have done, the users are really happy with it. It's very seamless. You can literally buy a card, adult, youth, or honored citizen. It will load into your phone. You can add money to it. You can just tap and ride. So this is a really nice transition for our smartphone users, and we think they're really going to love it. For our employer programs, just real quick, we've added over 100 employers to the Hop Fast Pass program. We continue to add those each month. We've really focused on the small to medium-sized employers to date, and we'll shift to the large employers late in 2018. We're working on making some improvements to the website, which will help to onboard those larger employers and make that more seamless. And as far as next steps go, we expect that HOP will continue its nice and steady adoption rate. And as part of that long-term strategy we put into place many years ago, now that HOP is out there and prevalent in the community, we will start to transition the paper tickets out of those stores. We'll be moving on from the smaller retailers onto the larger ones, getting the paper tickets and passes out of the locations. I would also note that we are exploring the Bike Town integration with Hop Fast Pass with the City of Portland, and that's progressing very well. So right now the developers are looking into how to make that work, but that'll allow you to essentially use your Hop card to unlock the bike and go use that as well. So with that, I think I'll wrap up. It's been an exciting project and a nice adventure, and I appreciate all the support you've put into this over the years and the guidance, and from the leadership team and Neil and Dee and others. It's been great, and so far, so good. Thank you.
As many of you may or may not know, Chris, this is his last meeting as a TriMet employee. And he'll be transitioning into the wild and woolly world of professional consulting next. So we're very sorry to lose him, but obviously wish him very well in his endeavors ahead.
Thank you.
Any questions for the board?
Not surprised me at all, so congratulations. I think you've gained a lot of experience and knowledge. It's going to help a lot of other folks. And good luck on your new enterprise.
Thank you.
Chris, what makes that equipment stand out? That works in the heat and works in the fruit. better
Well-
made, or I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of components. One of its strengths is building solid hardware, and so that they kind of pride themselves on building it that way. The card reader itself has also been proven in the industry as the actual device you tap,
Mhm.
be very robust. So I think it comes down to just the partners that are in the manufacturing have built it very robust. We also had extremely high requirements for durability in weather elements. Literally being able to flood this thing and have it be, 20 degrees to below zero. So
Yeah.
high specifications
Okay.
and no moving parts. So the solid state piece of equipment is a really important piece of that as well.
good move.
you.
I'm sure they get beat up pretty good, or
Yeah.
the exposure. Yeah, thanks. And good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, Chris, for your great work and the successful delivery. Sorry.
I have one more question up here.
How much longer will it take to be able to get Apple Pay and Samsung?
It's a good question. So right now, what I can cover is that we are exploring the technology with Apple, and hopefully we'll see something in 2018.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Again, thanks.
Thank you.
very much. Again.
We wanted to give you just a quick update on a large number of public meetings and conversations we've been having about our potential service plan for next year, as well as a number of other topics, including low-income fare citation and the Hop Pass implementation. So, Fast JC to give you a top-level report on those, on what we've heard from our constituents and riders. JC?
So good morning. So I'll give you a quick update on where we're at when it comes to our outreach on those 4 topics that I brought before you about 2 months ago. How do I get this to... Oh, there we go. So those topics were, if you remember, the proposed service improvements on our bus lines, what that means, new bus lines, better frequency, all-night service, an extension of a new bus line out to the Portland International Airport. The budget, the capital investments that we're making in revamping some of our oldest MAC stations, testing electric buses, the Division Transit Project, Red Line Extension, and others. When it came to the 2 other topics, the fare citations process, really informing folks about what this process is and to get some feedback from them. And with the low-income fare program, again, introducing this new program to them, as well as getting some feedback on how it should be administered. So when we look at how we reached out to folks, this is probably one of the largest outreach endeavors that we have had at the agency. We had 7 public open houses around the region. We had employee open houses, so they knew how to talk about these improvements. We had numerous stakeholders. We also had extensive media coverage, getting the word out, not only about what we're planning on doing, but also to request feedback from folks. We used Twitter. We had our TriMet.org/plan page as a repository for information, as well as asking for feedback. We called it an online open house. We also had ads in various papers and used social media, but one of the big things that I want to point out to you is one of the first for our agency, and that is we mailed to over 160,000 addresses within a quarter mile around the bus service, the proposed bus service changes. This is new for us because we have not done this on the point in time where we're proposing it, we're thinking about it. We did this for 2 reasons. One was to obviously ask for feedback, but 2, to build excitement around some of the investments that we're making in our service. So it's gone very well. It's costly, but we think that it's definitely well worth it. Obviously, we used email to get out to people, onboard outreach, low-income fare and citation survey, which you'll hear more about that from Eric Van Hagen and John Gardner in their presentations to you. We also used multicultural organizations to really help get feedback from limited English proficiency communities. All in all, we received over 6,500 comments as of December 1st. So we still have, and it closes December 31st. So that comment period continues. So what we heard, these are very, very high level. So when you read them, but I will say this, is that we have had general support for all of that we are proposing. So when it comes to service changes, people love the Line 4 split idea. They also like quicker transfers on the Line 4 on the mall. And they were very excited about us bringing back 24-hour service. So there's just a lot of support around the service investments that we're making. When it comes to the low-income fare program and the citations process, again, just general support for, yes, please do this. A little note about the citations process. We heard some good feedback about having community service options for food kitchens and animal shelters, which I thought was interesting. With our buses, people are really excited about our electric buses, with our budget. A lot of excitement around our investments in electric buses. Happy to see the red line extended to Hillsborough, and definitely waiting for the high capacity transit to come to Division. So what's next? As I said, the comment period ends the 31st. We are routing all of those comments to the respective managers for changes. You will see you'll see refinements and proposals will go back out to the public in early February. We're thinking about 3 more public open houses. Obviously a lot less outreach this time around because there was so much support. And then we'll finalize the service proposals. Those will be brought to you at your March board meeting with a public hearing, and then you'll consider it for final approval at the second reading in April. So, and when it comes to low-income fare, a lot of outreach continues. As you'll hear later on, we will be developing a lot of marketing and outreach plans for both of those programs. The beta test for low-income fare begins somewhere March, April. And we're going to be ramping up for a full implementation of both of those programs by July 1st. So a lot of work still to come. But I will say this, that people are very, very supportive, and it's a good feeling. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for JC? No, good report. A lot of effort. It's nice to see, and it is exciting time. And I hear the same thing when I'm out talking to folks about, especially the 24-hour service. I know how many times I've heard people comment on that. So glad to hear that what I'm hearing is consistent with what you're hearing too. So good. Thank you for the report.
Continue on, if I could ask Harry's supporter to come up, one of the things we want to do is regularly give you an update on our program regarding operator assaults and our work to try to reduce and indeed eliminate the opportunity for that. We've made some great progress, I think, working with our continuous improvement team over the last couple of months, and I'll let Harry take it from there.
Good morning. The continuous improvement team, I want to remind everyone, is really a very eclectic group comprised of bus operators, members of the executive board of ATU, the commander, and the district attorney, and then collectively, and also some road supervisors and training staff. And collectively, we've been making advancements. We are in the midst of the bus operator recertification program right now, and we are in round 2 of training operators on new skill sets and enhancing the existing skill sets in avoiding and preventing assaults. We are also introducing the same concepts with the rail operators, and that is new because unfortunately we do have incidents in which they are affected as well. Although they are in cabs, sometimes there is an altercation. So what I wanted to do is give you just a brief overview of some of the stats. Unfortunately, the numbers are relatively flat. We seem to be making improvements, but then we see a little bit of a rise, and we're still trying to study that and understand exactly why that is. Recognizing that training alone will not solve the problem, the continuous improvement team also recommended the adoption of a barrier. These barriers, this is an example of the barrier that we are suggesting. The barriers are actually in use by a number of other transit agencies nationally, so this is not unique to Portland. The one that you do see is one that is currently being used in Washington, D.C. They are retrofitting every single bus with this barrier. So we wanted to make sure that when we suggested a barrier. And in fact, I will say that the members of the CIT actually came up with the suggestion itself as well, is that it's one that is accepted by most operators. And one thing that we heard clearly from the operators is please don't make it a full enclosure, because that presents some unique problems in itself. But rather that it's a enclosure that it encompasses about 3/4 of the operator's area. The original barrier that was examined was one that did not, was about a half enclosure, and we received feedback and the operator said, no, we want something more. So this is a barrier that has an extended glass. And again, this is what Washington, D.C. adopted in the metro system. So these are photos, but I think it's more telling if I actually showed you how this worked. So I'm not sure how to activate this. And what you'll see in the video is the barrier in one of our buses. It's one of our bus transportation trainers that is demonstrating the barrier and how it's used. Well, maybe another time. There it goes. It's very simple to use. It's also designed so that if an individual is in a mobility device, when they board, it allows room for that. We have heard some comments that there's some very large mobility devices that it may not be able to accommodate. But again, this barrier style is in use in a number of other transit agencies, and they seem to have good success with it. That is a filler that there was a gap previously, and it's a filler plate that closes that gap so that a hand or some other object can't be introduced behind the operator. The operator does have the ability to slide the glass shield forward, and so that it's fully extended. There is a cutout as well because of access to the fare box. It does not go from floor to ceiling, and it does have intermediate stops in between as well. So it could be fully retracted. It still offers protection even in the fully retracted position. But if you want and feel that you want more protection, it could be slid forward more. And that's really, we're making that optional to the operator as to which position they wish to have it deployed. We will then, once it's in use, then we'll study, look at our incident rates again and see how it's working. So right now the plan is to place barriers on every single new bus procurement. So everything, not with the latest that we're receiving today, but those in the future, and then looking at retrofitting buses as well. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Questions by the board? So this is the design that we've selected now for?
Yes, this is the one the operators have settled on. And we have received some negative feedback, but what I find interesting is that for the most part, those that have provided the feedback never ever sat in the seat. It's just a perception problem. So the operators that are on the committee fully support this, including those that represent ATU. So we're moving forward.
All right. Thank you. Yes. Good. Yep. All right. Thank you very much for that report.
Okay, thank you.
And finally, one other report I mentioned earlier, if I could ask Doug Kelsey to come forward, that we actually have been seeing continued improvements in our operation and performance statistics. I'd like Doug to go through our overall continuous improvement effort in that regard.
Before I forget, I've been sick for 2 weeks. How are we ready for winter?
We are. Let me ask Doug to just sort of address that as well. We have an updated winter operations plan. It's in place, and exactly, we'll hope for cold, clear, and no snow is what we're hopeful. But Doug?
So maybe good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Maybe I'll address that one right up front if I can. The answer is yes. I think some of the learnings from last winter have been embedded in some of our readiness and resilience, and we've in some cases practiced them. I'll give you an example. Last year we had some of our trains had, if you have freezing rain, that is very, very difficult for anyone to operate in. So we've actually got more ice cutters out there, which are ability to potentially, well, you try and keep running as best as you can without jeopardizing safety. So not allow ice to build up over the overhead catenary system, so you can keep running them throughout the night to the degree that you can before Mother Nature takes over. So that's one example. So we'll be up to about 6 of the capability on our fleet that have that versus which basically was running 2 last year. So there's quite a number of areas that we've tried to build resiliency in, but there's only so far we can go. And we'll have to watch some of the decision making we made last year. Said, do we, as opposed to getting to more of a force majeure type of approach where it says maybe we need to stop sooner. In some cases where we had operators stranding out in buses, things of that nature. So last year, in fact, we pushed it so hard. I think we may need to look at some of the tactics that to make adjustments sooner. So yes, there's been a lot of work that's been put into this, and we are ready, including extra sand and all the other kind of fun things that go into this. So. Well, good morning, everybody. So I'd like to cover off the report in 3 key areas. I won't cover off every single element, but maybe highlight just the key portions for you and answer any questions you may have at the end. The first area is around the whole vehicle and system reliability side of things. As we look at bus and rail maintenance of way, in terms of their objectives they set for 2017, for the 3rd quarter. Now, those are established by the Federal Transportation Administration with a target of at least hitting 80%. The great news is the team is tracking here at 97.8%. They had very, very strong performance here, and they deserve a tremendous amount of credit, particularly with some of the mechanic shortfalls that we have, and I think the board is well aware of some of the challenges that come with that. So a lot of the mechanics have been working overtime. I just really want to thank all of them and the whole team to be able to pull off this this result. The rail equipment maintenance is declined slightly from 82.7% to 82.2, still well above the minimal target standard. And the challenge that particularly will come, and we'll talk a little bit later about this, is the Type 1 fleet performance. It's actually holding us back. The Type 5s, for example, are actually had a great month, and we'll get to that in a sec, just around the mean distance between failure. But all in all, solid performance there. In terms of the mean distance between failure, on the MAX system, had a very strong quarter, as increasing by over 21%. In terms of the mean distance between failures, again, the Type 1s, as I just referenced, they continue to hold the net fleet performance back. It's tracking around 3,000 miles mean distance between the failures. You kind of visualize that. That's somewhere between Portland and New York, distance-wise, visually. The Type 5s, though, had a terrific month of over 26,000 miles. So that's not to say the end state, but we need to keep moving the whole fleet up over time. And the benefit of it is our mechanics and our service workers get to go work on the higher type of work. It'll be better for everybody. And ultimately, the benefactor of all this is the customer experience. The bus mean distance between failures also increased by over 32% in the last quarter, so some really strong performance. The maintenance team's really been digging in, and they really deserve a lot of credit here from all levels to be able to pull this off. In terms of attendance, just up slightly, 0.6%. Could have been even higher with all the overtime that's been running for everybody. At some point, that's why we need all hands on deck to be able to pull these results off. Second category for you today is service delivery. The bus on-time performance shows an increase of 2.1% over the previous year and quarter. This is a result of when we started this, the on-time performance was about 81.1% over the whole year period. We're now tracking in the 86 to 87% range. So actually even the complex bus system, in some parts, as we all know, we're running on the public services of the road network. We don't control all of that, but there's many parts we do control, and there's parts we can influence. So a lot of work is in play as to the parts we can control directly, getting the buses out on time. The performance there has been very, very strong. We started off in the low 80s. We're now averaging in the mid to high 90s in terms of getting the buses out of the yard on time, and that's something we directly control. So great, thanks to the operators for helping us do this, and as well as all the levels of management. Max on-time performance, it decreased slightly over this quarter period from 84.4 to 84.3, so a tenth. What I can tell you is, in fact, the last 3 days of actual performance are all above 91%. In fact, the last 31-day rolling period was just shy of 90% of 80.9, 80.7%. So the general trend is we're seeing a lot more days well over the 90% range, which show us the agency can do this. But it takes everybody, like an orchestra, to hit their notes. And a lot of people deserve a lot of credit as we move and transform to making sure we're safe while we're doing this, but ultimately the benefactor again is the customer on this. This is part of the customer experience. West on-time performance declined by over 2% from Q3, from 95.7 to 93.5%. Again, this is attributed mainly to some signaling issues, and then also if we go back, it seems like a long time ago now, but we had some high temperatures back then. So we have some speed restrictions that come with some of these high temperatures, and that's what you see hitting the result. This is something, though, we do need to watch on the west side. My own assessment is the performance should be in the top quartile performer of the 95 plus range. So we're dipping down into the lower 90 range. I think this is something that the team is going to be looking at to say, what do we need to change here that we can control directly, including looking at some maintenance practices, things of that nature, and other potential capital investments that allow us to make sure we maintain that top tier performer level, which it historically has been. The boarding rides per revenue hour declined by 4% last year, and Neil McFarland spoke to some of the ridership issues briefly, and I won't repeat those. But I think a couple comments I would make. About half of the boarding rides per revenue hour is accounted for the fewer boardings, and the rest is due to increased revenue hours. So we're putting more service out there, and so some of the capacity hasn't yet grown into the new service that's available for people. So we start looking at it on not just a ridership basis, but a yield performance basis. So we're investing for the future a bit, if you will. But we will have to watch this. In terms of operator support, this is one area I think is quite interesting, is the bus collisions over the last quarter up by over 28%. So that's a significant increase here. And as we look at this, we've seen a lot of mirror strikes. And we have some newer operators out there as we kind of look at the analysis, and that's not uncommon when you have new operators. They need support. And one of the initiatives that I will mention to you that we're just in the process of implementing is a turn-by-turn capability. And in itself, it's not related to the collisions, but what we're going to do that is unique, and what a turn-by-turn is, it's a bit like if you go to Waze or other ways, it's a turn left here 100 feet. So we'll put our own routes in there, and it'll tell any operator what each route direction should be. But what is unique, what we're going to really put in here, is also identifying all of our high collision safety incident areas that we experience ourselves, and that it will identify it for an operator ahead of time. And I won't have this right, but you play it out, something to effect, like on Waze, if you follow that technology, it says, up ahead is a high collision intersection. So it may prompt the operator to be aware. what we've based on our actual statistics, and so we'll load those tables in, and that will become part of making sure the operator has the most appropriate information. So that's an example of sort of innovation in how we're trying to tie using the primary technology and leveraging it to also enhance safety for the operator and ourselves and our customers. Fixed route complaints are down by 6.8% last year and flat compared to the quarter. The service delivery complaints have also decreased by over 8%. Safety-related complaints are up by 6%. However, when you really look at the analysis on it, they're actually quite a small number when you start looking at things that are about 4 complaints per 100,000 boardings. So the number might pop up, but really a relatively small base number. Max operator complaints are essentially flat for the organization. The bus operator commendations very consistent long-term upward trending. This has been just a great success story, and the operators really need to be applauded and congratulated for those results. Not only at the individual level, because they're hard jobs. They're hard jobs dealing with the public, and they do a great job for us all. Now, if I remember, just last year's was actually the highest on record also. So if we remember where we were, so there's an adjustment downwards, but that long-term trend of where we're going is actually very, very positive. And finally, the last comment I would make, and happy to answer any questions after that, is really around max rule, the violation side. So I elected to wrap this in briefly as part of the overall performance, which was reporting separately on it. I think in summary, the strong results have been achieved over the past year, and we've actually seen a 50% reduction in actual violations. So significant progress, lots more to do. It takes everybody has a role in this to help us through this, including capital and planning and training, and we're putting more training hours out there to help particularly those new operators. So, but I think the results I think are positive, but we need to stay vigilant on this and do even further. So that would conclude my comments, and happy to answer any questions.
Did you have the shutdown out there on the west? Wasn't there maintenance? Was going to be a shutdown, or I remember we approved the contract, and I forget who, a couple months ago. You had to go underneath the rails to do some work, tunnel up.
Downtown?
No, out west, on the west.
Oh, on west. I'm sorry, I thought it was out west. I'm sorry, I missed the T there. Sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
correct.
my
So
fault.
yeah, so yes, there was with the hot weather, I think we had it's called sun kinks. So if you get certain temperatures, the rail will actually buckle a bit. So we had to go remedy some of that, and that combined with some of the signaling issues.
Signal, and I remember the signal stuff.
Signal issue was definitely a part of it, but
Yeah.
we did have sun kinks out there this past summer, which was can happen from time to time.
Okay, thanks.
Real kinks.
Real kinks.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Performance it's nice to see reporting, and it's nice to see we're making the needle go the right way. So thank you very much.
And
All right.
Mr. President, that concludes my report. So thank you for your patience this
All right.
morning. I had a
Good
lot to go over
reports.
with
Thank
you. Yep.
All right, with those board reports and general manager's report out of the way, let's move on to the consent agenda. For those watching, the items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board on one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to the consideration of the consent agenda. And I will point out there are four items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of our board minutes from October 25th, 2017, and for November 8th, 2017. We also have a resolution that directing that the reading of all ordinances is by title only. That's to save our county council from reading about 100 pages of an ordinance. And we do have the full ordinance in front of us, so we can have it available. The third is a resolution authorizing a contract with Ortiz and Associates for bus stop shelter and amenity maintenance and installation. And then the final item is a resolution for the Board of Directors acting in its capacity as the TriMet Contract Review Board, which is exempting from competitive bidding requirements a contract for construction manager / general contractor services for the Gideon pedestrian overcrossing project. So with that, are there any items on the consent agenda that any member of the board would like to have removed or have questions about?
Sure. Well, having worked around running trains, part of my career, you know, working on the bridge over there. Yeah, I'm just really, you know, it's.
Indeed, that's one of the reasons we wanted to use the construction manager, general contractor.
Is there a special? Are there a couple firms who do that as a rule?
I would say there are a number of firms.
Okay.
I don't believe it's a particularly small number, but we'll see some of our sort of normal firms that we see on rail-related construction, but other firms as well, because, and I would just note that the staff has really worked well with the Union Pacific Railroad, which is, of course, the prime user of those tracks. So.
Okay.
So I think where you're going
I just want to bring it up. That's all.
Well, make sure I understand, so anybody listening on this understands that we're exempting from public bidding this work, but we are going to go through a competitive procurement process to obtain the services of somebody to do this work. And I think what I'm hearing is there's going to be adequate number of folks that can participate in.
Adequate number of folks who have a more than adequate amount of experience working around trains.
Right. Right. Other questions on the consent agenda? Well, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. All right, let's move on to items 4 in our agenda, which is our resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution 17-12-86, which is authorizing the general manager and the chief negotiator to enter into a new working and wage agreement with Division 757 of the Amalgamated Transit Union.
And I'd like to bring up, obviously, Randy Stedman, who's been our chief negotiator associated with this effort, but also just note that it's a great pleasure to be able to bring this resolution to you. And I wanted to, just at the outset, express my deep thanks to everyone involved in negotiating this on the TriMet team as well as the ATU team. I think we've got a very good contract recommendation that I'm very pleased to recommend to you. So we'd like Randy to go through that with you.
Thank you.
If you please.
Do I have a mouse? Excuse me while I get oriented here. Oh, okay. Can you just kind of scroll for me? Sorry, I'm going to work from the document, the Word document that has the logos on it. I know the board has been fully briefed on this in executive session, so I'm going to focus on some key aspects of the contract, but the bargaining team is pleased to recommend to the board adoption of this tentative agreement between ATU 757 and TriMet. There were approximately 40 individual provisions that changed in the contract. A number of them had no or negligible financial impact. In your document, those are represented by the items below the red line. There were 11 proposals or groups of proposals that did have some significant financial impact above the red line, and I'm going to focus on some of them today. Tracy, if you could go to the next slide. Looking at the table that has a summary cost of the contract proposals that on the first page are identified as 1 through 11, what they show here is a comparison between the status quo and the contract changes. So, for example, the number 1 there, wages. While our wages are going up because of numbers of people and so forth, and the status quo, as you recall in the last year of the last contract, was 3% increase. What we're comparing here is the change from the status quo. So, for example, in the second and third year of the contracts, the proposed increase is 3.25%. What we're capturing on this page is the difference between 3.25% and 3%, the status quo. So here in this summary of all of the major cost proposals, What it shows at the bottom in green is a cost compared to the status quo of just over $2 million, $2.2 million for the term of the contract. The term of the contract running from December 1st, 2016 to November 30th, 2019. Go to the next one. So one of the key proposals, of course, is the wage proposal. Let me just take a moment to orient the audience to the tables. The tables that are banded in blue above show our costs under the new contract. The table below, banded in yellow, shows what our costs would have been had the status quo been brought forward. And the green at the bottom is the difference between the new contract and the old contract. Off to the right, and the total costs per year are our gross costs over the term of the contract. I wanted to include that so we don't just look at the cost of the contract proposals, but also to see what our investment in some of these items are. So for example, we have $603 million in wages under the new contract over the term, but compared to the status quo, our wages are expected to go up $1.7 million. And when you do these calculations, of course, you have to assume an employee base. For the base year, which was the last year of the contract, we actually had 2,421 employees, and we're assuming for the 3 years of the contract that we have 2,492. That's the actual current head count for the union employees. We know that there will be growth, but to give a comparison, sort of an apples to apples comparison, we're assuming all 3 years have that same number of head count. In the wages proposal, it includes a 3% retroactive wage increase, and in year 2, a 3.25% wage increase, and the same for 3 year for most classifications. We had, as you may recall, a midterm agreement with the ATU to increase the student operators, the mini run operator trainees, substantially to 14.25. That is represented here for year 1 with an increase to 1468 in the second year, and then the 3.25% increase in the third year. The journey workers are who are at $30.39 an hour now. There are approximately 273 of them at this point. They are also receiving, as a part of this TA, a $1,000 ratification payment. And then in addition to the general wage increase, the mail service clerk, there's one FTE in that category, and that person is being given, in addition to the 3% wage increase, retroactive $1 an hour increase. So again, the total cost of wages over the 3-year term compared to the status quo is an increase of $1.757 million. Another key proposal that I want to focus on with the board here is the step advancement for service workers. This is actually a TriMet proposal. In a number of our proposals, what you'll see is that we focused our investments on lower tenured and lower paid employees. The service workers is an example of that. What we're doing is a step bump for all of those in the first 7 steps of what is now an 8-step progression. In addition to the wage increases, there's about a 6.5% or so step bump on average. So those folks that are receiving a step bump will get the regular rate increase, the general wage increase, plus approximately a 6.5% increase. And then going forward, we'll have a 7-step schedule for the service workers. The cost of that proposal compared to the status quo over the term of the contract is about $607,750. Night shift differential is another area where we made some strategic investments. Again, a lot of the folks working on the night shift may have lower tenure as less desirable shifts. So for a number of classifications, we have increased the differential from 25 cents an hour to $1 an hour for hours worked between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. We also increased the differential for all the maintenance employees from 40 cents an hour to $1. Their basis now will be on the same basis as all the other classification, meaning only the hours worked between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. In the past, if they had more than 50% of their hours worked between that period, then all of the hours were subject to the shift differential. This change will cost about $544,000 over the term of the contract. Healthcare. The reason this slide is in here, even though the proposals, the TA has no incremental increase in healthcare costs, we have such a large investment. I wanted to show all of the costs associated with that. So we have approximately in the first year of the contract, about $60 million invested in healthcare costs. There were no changes to the healthcare program except for changing out the post-65 supplemental UHC plan. There's no cost impact to that at all, but it is a plan that was more attractive to the ATU members, and we were happy to make that change. All of the concessions that were negotiated during the last contract were retained in this contract, but for that swap out, that no-cost swap out of the post-65 supplemental program. Going to the mini-run operators. A number of the proposals in this contract related to working conditions to improve the working conditions of mini-run operators. So in this proposal, what we're doing is establishing that vacation accruals will be based on the date of hire when they become full-time operators. Previously, there was a different schedule for mini-run operators versus full-time operators. Now, when they become full-time operators, we'll go back and basically give credit for that service time as a mini-run operator. Also, current operators who formerly were mini-run operators will also have an accrual based on the hiring date. Leave hours will now be based on the scheduled hours, which may be, for example, 10 hours, where previously they might receive a lesser amount for the holidays and for the leave hours. So that's also a recognition of improved working conditions for the mini-run operator crew. This will, the cost of this over the term of the 3 years will be about $1.6 million. And finally, TriMet was able to negotiate a few small changes to the contract. As you'll recall, our strategy was proposals that were few in number and modest in impact. But there was one proposal that we absolutely had to get agreement on with the ADU, and it has to do with our midlife remanufacturing of our fleet, which we simply don't have the personnel for and don't have the facilities to handle. What we wanted to do is to be able to contract that out to a vendor off-site to have that sort of studs up remanufacturing of our fleet over time. This will, during the term of the 3-year contract, we estimate save about $2.6 million, but there are future savings that much of the costs associated with this are acquiring and training new personnel and facilities that we won't have to build in order to accommodate this work. And it will also allow us to do the work in a shorter number of years. So taking a little bit longer look, although the savings for the term of the contract is $2.6 million, over the 11-year period shown with that small table at the bottom is about a $5.2 million savings. A lot of that, again, is capital costs, avoided costs for facilities, and avoided costs for training. It means that we'll be able to redeploy those folks to other maintenance work rather than having them work on the remanufacturing or rehab of the fleet. So that's the key provisions, I think, from a cost standpoint. In summary, I think this is a good contract for both parties, far better than the rollover that we proposed in 2016. It achieves a critical midlife remanufacturing ability to contract out. retains the health care cost concessions previously negotiated. It does increase our costs, $2.2 million, but it does focus our investments, I think, appropriately on the lower paid and lower tenured employee. And I was gratified by the 94.7% support of the contract by the ATU. I think that it shows that the concessions made by both parties in the end were agreeable and is a good deal for both. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Stedman. Questions by the board? Seeing none, maybe what we ought to do is get a motion on the table here to approve Resolution 17-12-86, which is authorizing the General Manager and Chief Negotiator to enter into a new working and wage agreement with ATU Division 757. A motion to have a second. Great. With that, maybe we'll stay there. Maybe we might have some questions, but I think maybe comments from the board on this action, because I think it is a good contract. You guys did a great job, and congratulations to staff and the ATU for working hard to do this. So anybody, Director Esmond, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
94.7% is huge. I've negotiated contracts and tried to ratify them, and that's out of the ballpark. That's wow. So thank you, both of you, Shirley and Randy, and Mary, you too. So, but you know, negotiation team. So everybody seems to be happy. So I'm happy with this. Thank you.
When I first got on the board, TriMet had been through a rather long period where contracts were settled only through arbitration. The last contract and this contract have been settled through negotiation, and I think these contracts are proof positive that reaching agreement of people around the table is far better than having a contract imposed by an outside arbitrator. It's a tremendous achievement. You know, my thanks to ATU, Shirley, and the ATU negotiating team. A major thanks to Randy and all the members of his team, because this is a lot of work and a lot of discussion, but to come out with something as positive for both sides as this, I think is a real achievement. So I congratulate both bargaining teams.
Thank you.
And I'll just echo what both directors have said so far. This is it's a great contract, as Randy's already referenced. And you know, as we begin to move forward and the organization forward, you know, we certainly want to always be keeping the stakeholders, the riders, everybody in the region in mind. And I believe both sides did that. President Block and her leadership, Vice President Hunt, and all the members of the ATU want to thank you for your efforts in helping move this forward and really taking care of this region and thus the state, and Randy and the negotiating team on the staff side. You know, I think it just represents, you know, both sides coming together and having a conversation and a negotiation that really produced something that I think allows this organization to move forward and, again, take care of the riders and the stakeholders and thus help this region to move forward, along with some of the other incredible things that are moving forward in the organization, such as the low-income fare. So I think all of this contributes to our agency being able to even move those things forward and really contributing to the significant opportunities that exist here for moving people to poverty, prosperity. And that's really something that I think stands at the forefront of what everybody has been really focused on. So thank you, everybody involved.
Well, I guess I would just make a statement that this is a heck of a piece of work, and I think with our success at the legislature, with the new funding, with our increment and our payroll tax, with this partnership with the union, I think we have a great opportunity to really expand service, quality of service, coverage for all of our citizens here in the Portland metro region. So I think it's a great contract, and again, I want to echo what everybody's saying, and thanks to the ATU and thanks to our staff for doing a great piece of work here. With that, is there any further discussion? Are you folks ready to vote on this contract? Well then, all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-12-86, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you
Again,
very much.
congratulations and thank you all. All right, let's move on to the next resolution, which is Resolution 17-12-87, which is authorizing a contract with Stellar J Corporation for Ruby Junction Shop Modifications Project.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is a resolution that approve a contract with Stellar J for modifications at our Ruby Junction light rail maintenance facility, essentially improving floor lifts, changing out some bridge cranes to much larger, higher capacity, as well as some other modifications. And I would note that this is a project that's funded out of the remnant of the Orange Line budget. So we have the funds coming out from the federal full funding grant agreement project that was defined. This was a contract awarded by or proposed here through the invitation for bid process, or essentially the low bid process. We had good competition. We had actually 4 contractors submit pricing on this, and the low price came in by Stellar J at $3,197,000. It's a little bit more than our independent cost estimate, but I believe that that reflects the current situation in the construction market, and we're seeing prices escalating a little bit faster than we have seen in the past, and so I expect that we'll continue to see some of these changes in the marketplace over time, over the next few months. So this is a recommendation to award to that contract. I would note that there is a 6% DBE participation in this contract. The work will be performed mostly by Stellar J employees. It's a small firm, 47 employees, approximately 26% women, 13% minorities. And just to note that when we do a low bid, we have probably a little more limited ability to actually influence those outcomes. So I would tell you that your staff and your team continue to be motivated to work with contractors to suggest and increase the level of DBE or participation over time. So with that, we recommend your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Steve Witter is here as well in that regard.
Question as much as a comment. The spread between the highest and the lowest, that's out of a, say, $4 million and change contract, that's $1 million. And that kind of raises my eyebrows a little bit as far as, plus then you have the change order money in there, and I hope we keep our eyes on it real well, okay?
Promise that we will.
Because that work is kind of specialized, moving cranes around, and
yeah.
So I'll be a yes, but I just want to pay attention to that.
Very good. Appreciate that.
Good comment. Other comments or questions? Do you have any questions on the second resolution, Director? Okay. Well then, are we ready for somebody to offer a motion and to approve Resolution 17-12-87?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right then. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-12-87, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to Resolution 17-12-88, which is authorizing a contract with Reese Complete Security Systems for building access control maintenance, repair, installation, and consultation, intrusion detection consultation, and alarm system monitoring, maintenance, repair, and installation. That covers it.
It covers it. And Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is an attempt to bring together a series of more discrete activities under one contract that really deal with the overall performance and maintenance of our security systems in all of our facilities. And as you can imagine, they're far-flung and they're many in terms of their number of installations. Our previous activities had primarily aligned ourselves with contracting opportunities that or contracts that were established by Portland State University. As we began to look at the best way to procure these services going forward, we thought one contract that we competitively procured was really the best option for us. So in that regard, we did issue an RFP and received 2 proposals, one from Reese, one from a firm, Convergent Technologies. We believed Reese was much more highly qualified, and so asked for best and final offer from them, and they actually reduced the price during that overall offer. The note here is that the contract will be in the amount of $226,000 for a base year of 1 term, and then we have additional 4 option years if the performance is up to standard, and we believe that's in the best interest of the agency. So this approval would authorize both the option year, base year, as well as the option years for a total of $1,132,000. And that compares, by the way, to the independent cost estimates very close to that, $1,164,000. I'd also note that Reese is a State of Oregon certified emerging small business, will self-perform all the work, and the current workforce is 13% female and 10% minority. With that, we recommend your approval.
Questions of the General Manager? Seeing none.
I just think it's smart to have one-stop shopping, to borrow a phrase.
All right.
One way of looking at things.
Is there someone who'd like to offer a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
You pick, okay? I think it was, here we go. All right. Is there any further discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-12-88, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, let's move on to Resolution 17-12-89, which is authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Metro for the environmental phase and project coordination services for the Southwest Corridor Transit Project.
Mr. Board members, you may have recall approving an intergovernmental agreement at your November meeting. I believe it was November. October, thank you. How time flies. That actually brought funds from the Regional Transportation Program to TriMet to fund the development work for the Southwest Corridor project. This is a follow-on resolution that actually contracts with Metro some of those remaining funds back to them in favor of their performing services for us. We are probably unique in the nation in that we have a very close working relationship with our MPO. And during the planning phases of work like Southwest Corridor, Metro's in the lead, and they contract with us for the engineering sorts of and transit operations experience that we can bring to the table. During the later phases of project development, where engineering and key decisions associated with transit operations are sort of fundamental, we're the lead agency, and we contract back with Metro. So this actually covers both some a little tail of that planning phase, as well as moving forward to that project development engineering phase. So the total value of the intergovernmental agreement over the years is $5 billion. We believe that that will be adequate to bring us forward toward the full funding grant agreement, completing the draft environmental impact statement, and as well as the final environmental impact statement that will be part of the project development phase of the overall corridor. So we have experts here associated with that work if you have any questions, but I certainly recommend approval.
Maybe explain for the audience where the $5 million on this effort is coming from.
So this is coming from funds that Metro has allocated to support the development of the Southwest Corridor. And again, they are stretched over a large number of years. We will actually be, and the board has approved a resolution to authorize the bonding of those funds to bring some of that money forward. And it's out of those proceeds of the bonds that these funds will be, or the cash payments, depending upon the mix of a year that these funds will be paid from.
Good, thank you. Other questions? Okay, then. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 17-12-89?
So moved.
Have a motion. How about a second? All right. All right. All those in, is there any further dialogue or discussion? Seeing none, okay. Then all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-12-89, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. And then moving on to the last resolution this morning, which is Resolution 17-12-90, which is appointing additional members to the House Bill 2017 Advisory Committee.
You might recall, I think also in October, we brought to you a resolution that established the committee, and this is under the general guise of the HB 2017, which has a requirement for public consultation associated with developing a plan that ultimately will be submitted to the Oregon Transportation Commission that demonstrates how we will be using the new revenue associated with the payroll tax, employee paid payroll tax that the legislature approved as part of the overall transportation package. Long story short, we both had some questions. A question from Director Esmond, plus additional work in terms of making sure that the committee had complete representation related to many stakeholder groups in the region. So we have some additional names that we would like to add to the group. I think, as we noted before, this will be a work in progress because the Oregon Transportation Commission will be considering rules ultimately that will guide this process. And so this is a little trying to get ahead of that so that we can make sure that we can get these funds flowing as quickly as we can to benefit the riders in this region. And would just note that there may be further adjustments as time goes on, but do recommend your approval of these excellent additional additions to the overall HB 2017 committee.
Good. Questions for staff?
What is the total membership of the committee after this?
Let me ask Bernie to, rather than me try to drudge up the number.
Morning. We'll have 25 members total after this appointment.
Okay. And we've heard, well, and then we heard some comments during the public comment period about making sure that the committee is diverse and representing all interests, and this is an effort towards that. But if you could kind of comment on the demographics of
sure. So we had two sort of pieces of feedback between the time you acted on the first slate of members and this addition. Part of that feedback was from the committee itself, and they wanted to see more rider representatives and more geographic representation. So the first three members on the committee are really folks that we identified who are regular riders of the system, who are not from sort of the city of Portland. They're from a more diverse area of the region. And then we also heard feedback from Director Esmond about having organized labor represented on the committee. So Chris Carpenter fills that role. And then Dan Bauer is one of the requirements that's emerging from the rulemaking, as Neil mentioned. That's a work in progress, is that other transit providers within our area should be represented. So streetcar, we already have a representative from Ride Connection, which is another big provider. So we added streetcar as well. And then Art Pierce is essentially a replacement for Dan Saltzman, who's announced that he's going to be leaving and is not available to participate.
Thank you.
I'm glad you you brought in Constructing Hope, who, for the audience, they do a very good service getting people ready for jobs in the blue collar world. My former boss is on the board there, and also the Hispanic Chamber. That's good. Good job. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. And based on that, what I think I heard is, based on your answer to Director Prosser, is we welcome other suggestions for input into this.
Exactly.
This
and I mean, the committee is sort of just part of the process. We're having public meetings. We met yesterday. So we have the opportunity for public input at those meetings, and then we'll be having an extensive public outreach process associated with the development of the plan and vetting that with the community. So that will be as extensive or more extensive than the outreach that we've been doing around the service plan and budget over the last few months.
Okay.
Is that a small? Was that considered a small committee? Or?
25? No, that's a pretty big committee.
Who's the cat herder, Mr. Bottomley?
So we have two co-chairs, Deanna Palm, who's the executive director of the Hillsborough Chamber, and Diane McKeel, who is a former Metro or a Multnomah County commissioner and is very well connected in the Gresham area.
Yeah, she is.
The new Lake Oswego.
Good. All right. Anything further? Is there then a motion to approve Resolution 17-12-90?
So move.
Move. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 17-12-90, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. You'd like to have a break before we go to the next ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we take 5 minutes? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, perfect. I understand.
I was
That's all right. How you doing there?
Keep me awake.
Want to get you a cup of coffee? Director Bauman is on her way back up here. So we've gone through all of the resolutions, and we're now to Ordinance 347 and the first reading. And this is an ordinance that will make changes to TriMet code to accommodate our new low-income fare program. So I will turn to TriMet General Counsel Shelley Devine to read this ordinance by title only. Ms. Devine.
Thank you, President Warner. Ordinance number 347 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, adopting a low-income fare program and amending TriMet Code Chapter 19. This is the first reading and public hearing.
Thank you. Before we get into discussing it, maybe Neil or you could and John could give us a little bit of input, or I see another new face here. I don't know, so maybe you can do some introductions for us.
Right, so let me just first of all just note that I think this has been, as many of the comments you received earlier, this has been a multi-year process to really develop a program that we can really be proud of, and I think we can be proud of the recommendation that's before you right now. I'd like John and Carl Green, who's here with him, to actually review the key facets of the ordinance and also the Title VI analysis that was conducted associated with it. And again, anytime we change our fare ordinance in any substantial way, you'll be seeing the results of the Title VI analysis.
Perfect.
So, John?
All right. Well, good morning, President Warner. Again, my name is John Gardner. I direct diversity and transit equity. And I wanted to take this time to introduce you to TriMet's new Title VI and Equity Programs Administrator, Carl Green.
Welcome.
Good morning. And you'll hear a little bit from him in a few minutes about the Title VI analysis. But as Neil said, I'm going to do a brief overview of the, I want to say, about 24-page document you have. That is the actual Ordinance 347. Oh, I have clicker problems here. So as Neil said, this has been a long time coming. Long before I came to TriMet, Neil and Bernie Bottomley and John L. Bell were looking into the feasibility of a low-income fare program. And I want to say in the winter of 2016, you all gave us, the Diversity and Transit Equity Department, the charge of building out a program, but making sure that it was sustainable and it was something that was regionally funded, that it was meaningful, and that it provided us a subsidy that was actually making a difference in people's lives, and that it was targeted, that it was actually going to serve the right people, and finally manageable, that the cost of administrating the program wasn't going to be larger than the actual public benefit. And I think that's what you have in front of you today. So at the high level, this ordinance defines the low-income fare program. It establishes eligibility at or below the 200% federal poverty level, and it allows for eligible participants to participate in the program using a tappable ID card, much like the employee card or the honored citizen card. It provides a fare savings of 50% off the single-use and day pass, and as you heard earlier today, 72% off the monthly pass. It also gives the general manager the opportunity to build out the eligibility process, the application process, and some of the other program operational details that we're still working through. Oops, did I go too far? Sorry. All right, and so I want to let Carl speak a little bit about the process involved in the Title VI analysis. As you know, every time we do anything with fares, fare changes, we're required to do a Title VI analysis. So,
Mr. Board President, fellow directors of the board, again, my name is Carl Green, Jr. I'm the Title VI and Equity Programs Administrator. So although the benefits are implicit in the name of the program, per Federal Transit Authority, or specifically Title VI, a fare equity analysis is required on this proposal. So there are two key questions that drove this analysis, and the first question was, how might decreasing adult fares for eligible riders impact minority and or low-income riders? And two, do minority and or low-income riders stand to benefit equitably from this proposal? So the analysis, there's two-level analysis that was taken for looking at disparate impact as well as disproportionate burden. The first level of analysis looked at or compared eligible and non-eligible trips minority status within each group. And then the second level of analysis examined program eligible trips usage by minority status as well as low income. As far as the findings go, the analysis found that a greater percentage of minority riders would be positively affected by the fare change than the percentage of minority riders overall. And that was for disparate impact or for minority riders. As far as disproportionate burden, the analysis found that the specific structure of the fare decrease proposal will positively impact low-income riders. So at the tail end of this analysis, what we found was that concluded that minority and low-income riders will not be limited or denied benefits of the proposed changes.
So that's boiling down 12 pages of research into that one slide. So you already heard a lot about the community outreach we conducted over the last, Director Esmond.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
On the community outreach, does that include in stakeholders? Does that include business groups?
Right. So the regional task force actually had participation from the West Side Economic Alliance, especially when we were in the funding discussion about how would we fund this, and that was definitely part of the conversation. Right. So in addition to the regional task force, TIAC has been part of this conversation since day one. Long before I came, I think TIAC and others were looking for a low-income fare option for riders, and so they've been instrumental in sort of framing the program, building out the outreach approach, and just keeping us on task and on mission. And so, as you heard earlier this morning from Annalisa, they're very excited on where we're at now and where we're going. But in addition to TIAC, the regional task force, we also did the community forums that I spoke of earlier, and we played a part in the fall open houses. And we also still have an online survey out that we're allowing folks to give us input in terms of the length of program eligibility, the types of documents that we should be using to certify and verify their eligibility, and just other comments. And I looked at the group of comments, I think a week and a half ago, and read through about 450 comments, and that was quite an ordeal. But for the most part, very positive, and folks are just chomping at the bit and very excited for us to get started. So, oops. Let's see, sorry. It doesn't want to go. Oh, so the financial budget impact. So our estimate of the sort of the fully costed program would average around $12.3 million. I'll put an asterisk to that related to fare capping. We're unsure how that's going to affect the program, but that $12.3 million was the program cost that we talked with in terms of the Regional Low-Income Fare Task Force, and that assumes about 40 to 45,000 users. Using multiple types of single-use, day-use, and multi-pass, and that would make us larger than the King County program. So even that will take us a few years to get to, and we don't expect our initial cost to be anywhere near that. But we've already committed to sort of launching a program this July, and so we'll have some initial upfront setup cost. So the next steps, we have a remarkable team of TriMet staff from across departments. And the executive team has been very generous in loaning me their experts. Chris Tucker, who you heard from earlier today, is really actually the project manager for helping us build this out, and we're leveraging everything he can show us from what he learned in building out the Hot Fast Pass system. Tom Strader is also on that team, JC Vanetta, Ryan Schaub, Tashi Forrest, Carl Green, Martine Gonzalez, and Eric Van Hagen. So we have some TriMets from very different departments, bringing in a lot of critical energy and information to that process. So we feel really good about where the project's at this point. Still to be developed, of course, is the database for tracking the 45,000 or more folks who are going to register, the actual online application process, the marketing and communication plan. We're working with Bernie and JC staff on that. Developing the intergovernmental agreements to sort of leverage resources that exist to help register folks across the community, and then contracting with community-based organizations. So we're all prepared to start doing field training and system testing this spring, again, to make sure we're in position to launch the program this July. And so those are essentially the next steps as this ordinance goes to its second reading that you'll all do next month. So as always, a lot of information fairly quickly. Any questions?
Thank you.
I do have a question based on the experience in Seattle. You mentioned 40-some thousand potential or projected users of the program. How many of those would be new riders as opposed to existing transit riders?
So 49s who did the research for the program thought that we could see as much as a 2% increase in ridership. So all the math is essentially based on our total ridership and all the surveys we do of the population of our riders, their income levels. So we recognize in our region we have hundreds of thousands of people that could qualify for this program, but it's not clear in the other regions that have adopted low-income fare programs that you suddenly change the general population's behaviors. But I mean, the 2% increase would be, assuming 100 million rides, would be 102 million rides. So we do see this driving new riders to the system. It won't be clear until we actually start signing people up and getting a sense of their previous rider behavior, if they're new riders or not.
Is there an ability to ask individuals as they sign up whether
There
they've
is,
been-
and we can make that a point of the application process. Other questions?
Yes. And John, you may not have the answer to this, but maybe a general manager does. TriMet committed when this bill was passed that it would start and launch a program early, understanding that the dollars that are to come from this will not come to 2018 and later. How is the funding being covered to launch this until we get to the funds coming in from the bill that's being produced through the state, then it will be distributed to TriMet?
Mm-hmm. I will defer to Neil.
And bottom line is that these will be costs that we will bear through our existing revenue sources. So it will come through our current fund balance or contingency balance in the budgets for the initial startup. And just to note that as a follow-up to this, the board will see a budget amendment that will deal with both the true-up of the ATU contract approval as well as the ramp-up costs associated with this program prior to July 1 and the new budget year. And then we'll be in the position of beginning to balance that as we consider a new budget for fiscal year 19 that really starts after the first of the year. But candidly, it is a hit to the current revenue sources, but we believe that that's affordable, and we also believe it's fair. The goal here was to begin to have this benefit available as people are asked to pay a new payroll tax rather than the employer paying, the individual will be paying it. So it seemed like it was an important point to really bring those two points in time together. And even though there will be some sacrifice on our part to do that, we thought it was well worth it.
Thank you. I really knew the answer, but I wanted it emphasized so that people will understand that TriMet does care about all of its ridership and is working hard to meet and make the system, usable for everyone, and also to let people know that in spite of what you hear a lot about, we don't listen, we don't care, we're not doing anything, things are being done. And to do this long before we get any of the funds to help to try to offset it is a great move and a great gesture towards those who are dependent on public transportation, particularly in a low fare situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good comments. Good comments. So thank you first off to the team, and this is a heavy lift, I know that, and you guys have been working hard. This is an amazing amount of work to get it to this point right now, and we are working hard to get it implemented by July 1, so hats off to everybody. So board members, you've heard and seen about the outreach that's been done to help inform this proposed program. You've also seen the conclusions and heard them about the equity analysis that's associated with these policy changes. And our Transit Equity Advisory Committee has also reviewed the analysis, and you also have those comments. So does the board have any other questions regarding the transit equity analysis or any other concerns?
I'm not concerned. I just want to make a comment. This is very important to a lot of us. Not only people sitting here, but in other places. I know with my other hat, I lobbied for this bill in Salem. And I want to make sure that you have all the resources that you need, you being the big group. How's that? Support. You can say no. It's okay. No, but seriously.
No, and
I want to see it rolled out in July 1st, and something comes up other ways I can help someplace else, let me know.
And again, I think this started and has been consistently championed by Neil, but then Shelley Devine has loaned her staff, Dee Brookshire has loaned her staff, Bernie Bottomley has loaned his staff, soon Tim McCune will loan his staff. So Doug Kelsey, the entire leadership team is leveraging resources as well as putting forward budget resources that weren't planned as part of the FY18 budget. So I feel fully supported, and now we just need to hire some program staff and get this thing up and ready.
Okay. This was your shot to make.
I know.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so if the board is comfortable with the conclusions of the equity analysis, we'll move forward, and I'm going to open the floor to public comments on this ordinance. We all okay? Mm-hmm. All right. Before I open the public hearing, I do want to state that any written comments we received online or through the mail have been shared with the board, and comments cards completed today, and that information that was provided during public forum on this ordinance, I assume will be part of the formal public record for the public hearing today. Is that right? Okay, thank you. So we heard a number of folks this morning who testified in the public forum, and I don't have anybody else who's signed up for testifying on this ordinance at this time, but I am going to open the public hearing on ordinance 347 and ask if there's anyone who did not sign up in advance who would like to address the board here at this time. Yes, please. Yep.
So I'm David Bouchard again, and really, I really just want to say on behalf of Opal, I really appreciate that we're at this point. This was a long time coming. It took a couple of years to really get off the ground. It wasn't always easy. I know we definitely had a few moments where there was some tension, and honestly, we're wondering, are we going to be able to get this passed? And fortunately, we were, and it really is because it's not just because of our advocacy of it. Of course, that was a big part, because you have to start change somewhere, and a lot of times it does come from the community, but it does speak to the boards, to the willingness of you guys to work with us and really help us to come up with an affordable option for all of our riders. And we're especially glad about the 200% rate and the structure of the program. That's really what we were looking for. Again, we very much appreciate everybody on the board who has had these conversations, and it is going to be good to keep working in the future, and I anticipate that we'll be able to work together to improve the experience for everybody. So again, thank you very much. You guys really deserve, y'all deserve a hand for getting this far, and we're gonna be leaders nationally, and we're joining a select few agencies who have a low-income fare program. So kudos to all of us for that.
Good. Thank you very much for your comments. I'm glad you were able to stick around. Is there anyone else who didn't sign up earlier who would like to comment on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Oop. Sure, of course.
I just want to make a comment here to the audience and people out there watching this. Just because some of us wear a coat and a tie and our shoes are polished and our socks are match, doesn't mean that we've never been a low-income person. never had to get some help from the government, or had struggles, or who had to use food stamps to put food on the table for their family. So just an FYI for everybody out there. Thank you.
All right. The public hearing is closed. Mr. General Manager, do you have any other final comments you'd like to make before we move from this item?
No, sir.
All right. So for those of you watching this and anybody that's not been involved in this process, there is no vote today. This is our first reading. The second reading and vote on this ordinance will take place at our board meeting on January 24th, 2018. So with that concludes our regular business meeting agenda. Is there anything else to come before us today from the board members? All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn our business meeting. I don't know whether we need another break or should we just go right into our briefings? Everybody comfortable moving right into the briefings? Okay. Are you ready, Mr. General Manager?
I am, and I'd like to call Eric Van Hagen up. As you've heard, Eric has been instrumental in reviewing the options available to us under HB 2777, working through and meeting with a number of our stakeholders, and also working with an advisory committee put together to review the various options available to us at that. And there are a number of parameters associated with developing the system that I think it's important to get your general head nod or agreement with. And our objective would be to make sure that we have the information from you that would influence a recommendation that will come to you in a draft ordinance at your meeting in January. So with that little bit of background, let me turn this over to Eric, who can continue with the background and also begin to raise the various issues that have come up as we've deliberated on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Board Chair, members of the board. Eric Van Hagen, Senior Deputy General Counsel. A year ago in your December 2016 meeting, I was part of a panel that gave a briefing to you on fair enforcement and fair enforcement activities, along with John Gardner, Professor Renauer from Portland State University, Doug Kelsey kind of emceed the event, and I think Director Prosser at the end of that meeting commented on the complexity of the fair enforcement issue. And I think what I hope you would see today as we step through this is a continued recognition of the complexity and some of the challenges that are presented and some of the competing interests that we're trying to balance to come up with a thoughtful policy. The board at that time in December of 2016 also endorsed a plan to go to the legislature and ask for authority to implement administrative options for fare evasion citations. That was successful with the help of Bernie and his team to get the bill passed. And since then, we've been working with community groups and others to gather input to kind of fill in some more of the details of what a policy would look like, because the authority from the legislature was quite broad and left some key details to the board to complete. So we've been getting that community input. And in reaching those recommendations that are reflected in the memo that was provided to you all, trying to take into consideration the complexity of this issue, and we've endeavored to come up with a thoughtful, measured approach to a complicated issue. I just want to quickly review, again, you've got more lengthy materials with your board packet, but just a couple of quick highlights as we step through what the recommendations are here. Oh, there we go. I got it. I was clicking the wrong button. So just briefly, we did a number of different types of outreach. We had a survey online, community partner events. We had PSU look at this issue again. We looked at other transit properties, and we also had a community work group that I'll discuss in a little more detail. So just some quick background, though, just a couple of kind of key points to consider. First is what has been happening with our fare evasion rate. You can see going back to spring of 2011. That was, in 2011, the time period of a warning first policy. Just so the full context of this, is apparent. That we shifted then in 2011 from a policy of warnings first to generally issuing citations first, with some discretion to issue warnings. And what you saw was over time a bending of that curve there on the fare evasion rate, and it has since crept back up, which is certainly a cause of concern and something we'll talk a little bit more about. Wanted to briefly also touch on the reasons in that part of that fare evasion survey. People are asked why they didn't have their fare. The top two reasons are chancing it at 32% and forgetting to validate a mobile application ticket, which I think some people would say is, certainly our fare inspection staff would consider the equivalent of really chancing it. So that's a significant number of people who when asked, informed our staff that their reason for not having a fare were essentially playing the odds. And again, that's a consideration that we'll touch on as we come back to the recommendations. We also found that we had a challenge with respect to repeat offenders on our system. About a quarter of the fare evasion contacts had somebody who had within a 2-year period had another offense. And 1/3 of that group had 3 or more citations or fare evasion contacts on that record, and that was noted in the PSU study as a significant challenge. We took a look at where we are with our presumptive fine of $175 compared to other transit systems. We're on the higher end there, 19th out of 25 among the other properties. These are for first-time offenses, doesn't consider repeat offenses. $111 was the national average. In the transit properties we looked at, which we limited to those properties that were similar to TriMet in that they had an open as opposed to fully closed, barricaded type of system. So we tried to make that an apples-to-apples comparison. So with that brief overview of a lot of other contexts that you have more of in your board packet, we had a couple of different sort of recommendation points to consider. Portland State University had a recommendation of $100 or less as adequate to deter fare evasion. The community work group considered 2 different proposals, and you heard about some of those earlier, and I've tried to capture them there. One was a first, second, third, fourth offense fines of $50, $90, $150, $175. The second one was first, second, third, fourth offenses at 50, 65, 90, and 11. So both starting at 50. The second proposal had a slightly lower rate of increase for repeat offenders and capped it at the $111, which was the national average. That proposal number 2 was supported by OPAL, ACLU, Oregon Justice Resource Center, and the Multnomah Youth Commission, who are all members of the work group. And I think even though there are some differences between the recommendations that we have for you, I certainly appreciate the thoughtful and careful consideration that the work group provided, and I think certainly helped bring us to a better recommendations. The survey that we conducted online, among those people who responded that a citation should be provided, $75 was the average amount recommended in the survey that we did in the community. So all of that kind of background gets us to what the recommendations are for new penalties for fare evasion when compared to the current presumptive fine of $175. The recommendation is a first offense of $75, second $100, third $150, fourth and beyond would be $175. The idea being recognizing that you want to escalate the fines when people who are repeat offenders and are continuing to not pay their fare is a challenge that we have, and trying to deal with that challenge. $75 certainly puts us on the lower end for a starting fine, but is not as low as 50, which would put us kind of at the bottom there among our peers. And the concern would be that a $50 fine as a starting point would be so low that it would you would have a real challenge with the group of people who are chancing it, who you want to be addressing and trying to correct that behavior. A couple other important recommendations that are worth noting. Community service is offered there as an option. Again, an escalation in the hours that we tried to match as proportional to the offense, on the financial penalty. So a step increase for each offense, 4 hours for the first time. And that is a lower number, but we landed on it with the idea being that, you know, folks are going to have to get there, they're going to have to get back. It's going to be a substantial part of their day to contribute that community service. And we wanted to encourage and try and capture the people who right now aren't paying those citations, who end up getting defaulted and have additional fines added in the court system, to make that option available and feasible for them. The third option, the third part of this that I mentioned is something I'm excited about, is the option for folks who are eligible, who are cited for fare evasion. And if you're eligible for the low-income fare program, or you're eligible for an honored citizen fare reduction, if during the 90-day stay period that's given to us by House Bill 2777, if you enroll in that program and show us evidence that you've enrolled and loaded a minimum value of $10 onto your fare, your reloadable fare card, we'll waive the citation. And the idea was that we really wanted to create an incentive for people to get into the right fare program. We did not want to punish people who couldn't afford their fare, but really use this as an opportunity to get them into the right fare program. I haven't met a person who doesn't like that idea or opposes it. I will say, you know, credit where credit's due, that idea came, you know, following my meeting when I went out with Opal and met with them and had a very constructive conversation. And the idea came up during that meeting of discussing, you know, an income-based fine. And every time I heard that, I just thought that seems impossible to administer. How are we going to verify income? And as I left that meeting, though, the proverbial sort of light bulb went off, and I thought that there was a better way to leverage this 90-day period to allow people to enroll, to give them a real tangible incentive, the forbearance of a $75 fine, to get them into that program and get them paying their fare and get the resources that are available to them and get them connected with it. So those are the recommendations on those grounds, and be happy to answer any questions or discuss it further, with the idea, again, as was mentioned, that we would be able to fill in the details for an ordinance first reading in January.
Thank you. Good work. Thank you. Very good work. Appreciate it. So the things we heard about this in some of the testimony earlier were the amount for the first offense, right? And the kind of community service. I think that was one of the other concerns I heard. I suspect that those details aren't worked out, but I know that Director Bauman, you've been engaged in this a bit in much more detail than we have. Do you have any comments or thoughts on those?
Yeah, I did attend the work group meetings and was appreciated the opportunity to listen in on the conversation. And the conversations did primarily revolve around the amount of the fine. And you know what we've got going on is two sort of considerations. One is the hardship that can come out of the $175 presumptive fine for some members of the community against our stewardship of the system and creating incentives for folks to actually pay their fare. And so obviously the risk of a fine that's very low is that you'll have more people chance it, as Eric says, and just won't pay, won't buy a ticket on the chance that they won't get caught. And if they do get caught, the fine is so low that it's worth it to them to take that risk. So there's definitely a tension between those two concerns. Again, the hardship of the higher fine, potential court costs, and kind of the snowballing of financial penalties. So I think this proposal mitigates a lot of those concerns by creating the community service option. That's really important. By taking violators out of the court system for 90 days, you can avoid being in the criminal justice system at all. We're also mitigating by creating the low-income fare, right? There's more opportunity, you know, again, having the stay to allow folks to enroll in the low-income fare or honored citizen program, to me, also mitigates the impact of the fine. So we're proposing, the proposal is to lower the fine by a considerable amount. In my view, it should not be any lower than $75. To me, that's really the floor in terms of having an effective incentive for our customers you know, we're looking into increasing the number of fare inspectors so that there will be a real consequence to not paying to ride. And we've also talked about monitoring going forward the effect. What's the effect of reducing the fine so significantly? Is it causing more folks to not pay their fares? So I think all of those considerations, in my view, adequately mitigate the hardship to riders.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful and considerate. Other comments, questions? I mean, what we're trying to do for anybody watching this is give the staff some direction to put together an ordinance that we'll consider at our next business meeting.
So I've had the opportunity to talk with Neil about my perspective of the fine and the fine amount, and I'm a fan of a $50 fine, and I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into what we're talking about here, and kind of that risk of what's going to be my elasticity towards whether or not I'm going to pay my fine or take the risk of jumping on without it, and I referenced it when I was talking with Neil in regards to parking. I mean, sometimes, I'll jump out of the car, I'm headed to a meeting, and I'll forget. I just literally forget. And sometimes, I come back and there's no ticket, and many times I come back and there has been a ticket. And I mean, the cost in reference to the fine is, if I didn't pay my $2 parking fee, it's $35. It may have gone up. I haven't gotten a ticket in a while, so there has been a deterrence. My parents would be proud. I am learning. So in this regard, I struggle with the $75, even though we've got the opportunity for the mitigation through the community service and the enrollment in low income fare, because it's not always the individual is trying to evade or do anything in regards to that fare. It's I just the other day, I don't know if I can admit this and not get in trouble for this, but I forgot to tap. And I got on the max, and I was in fear, for the next 3 stops before I got off. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So there's those scenarios that go into place, and you can clearly see the direct relationship and correlation between the warning system that we had in place before and the reduction in fare evasion. Well, you pull that out, and I think there's a lot of encouragement to do something where there is an original fine, so that we can reduce that fare evasion. We know what the cost is for every percentage point. But as I sit here, I've had the opportunity to be engaged in the system for some time, and I'm a proponent of a lower initial fare. I mean, a lower initial fare. I can't even say that correctly. First offense.
You did well.
So that's. I mean, I would lobby for that personally. To the degree that I would vote no on a $75 first offense, and that would be the only thing that I feel uncomfortable about. But I feel strongly enough that I couldn't move forward with it in regards to kind of my experience and what I've seen, and I think that first offense at $50 will certainly remind me that I need to tap and I need to make sure that I function in the system. So I think there's a lot of folks that are involved in the platform and in the system that we use. I think it would just be a better program to start with something less than I think of $50 is certainly representative of something that wakes me up pretty instantly, because I can tell you $35 did it, in the parking situation.
Question for me is, if we instituted a first warning and then had the next be $75, but do we feel as though having the first violation a warning dramatically increases the number of fare evasion?
That has been our experience, yeah.
Okay.
And I would just also note that, if I might add, that think about our fare inspectors who are out there. It's very difficult to sort of make them be both judge and jury.
Right.
So one of the goals of this program is to really, have a very even-handed administration of the fair program out on the system, and then allow the back end to have some flexibility, as noted here, in terms of how those are adjudicated, so to speak.
So the administrative role, if someone wishes to appeal,
yes,
then have the circumstance evaluated.
Yes, and that's another notion I think that continues in the ordinance, which is there's an ability to appeal, to state your case, and that absolutely happens pretty regularly, even today, where, for example, we might see somebody who really is enrolled in a fair program who simply forgets it for the day, and they can demonstrate that they really did just leave their ID at home, and we can relieve that administratively, and those same options will be available to us moving forward.
I tend to agree with Lori's analysis in light of the fact we have a low-income fair program moving forward. You know, I think the first violator should suffer a greater expense than $50.
When I read through the materials,
you're on.
You know, getting ready for this meeting, I was good with the fine tree there, and I still am. Quite honestly, I had a little bit more problem with the community service, the first offense being 4 hours, but after hearing the explanation of how staff got there, I'm okay with that. And again, with the low, you know, enrolling people who are not currently in the low-income fair or not carrying an honored citizen card, in giving that option, you know, I think there's good protections in there and good alternatives. And so I guess I'm also agree with Lori that I think this is appropriate, and I'm okay with it.
Dr. Bethel, I haven't heard from you, or we haven't heard from you.
I'm okay with what I see in terms of the community service. I do have an issue with in terms of that first fine being $75, and here's why. If client cannot afford the fare, which sometimes is the reason, now to add $75 to the person for not being able to do that creates another burden on a low-income fare person. And that will be my great concern, because I think what that will do for us is that we will have more people who will then take the chance that I can't pay $75, but I still need to go, so I'm going to go down and try it one more time, and then they're going to keep repeating. The $50, I think, would be punitive enough, alarming enough to wake the person up to say that if I continue to do this, the next time it's going to be more. But this time it's going to cost me $50. For some, that's going to be a great amount to pay, and for others, it may not be as much, but it's going to be. And so what I want to do is send a clear message that you can't skip or evade your fare, but I don't want it to be in such a way that it's so demanding or oppressive on a person that they choose to do something different. So I would push with Travis, Director Travis, to reduce this first offense to $50.
Recognizing they've got an alternative to paying the fare, which is to do community service. So they wouldn't have to pay the fare. They could do community service of just 4 hours.
Let me mention just one other thing. Well, another topic that we discussed, or that was discussed at the work group, would be having the fare inspectors having printed on the citation or having available information about programs where individuals could get maybe a free pass if they can't afford it. kind of making those community resources available and have sort of an educational element as well. So, because certainly the big concern is ensuring that people who need to use transit can do it, can do so, even if their income is not at a level where they can afford the regular fare.
Director go ahead, I'm sorry.
If I might just note, that's exactly why this sort of Eric's, for lack of a better description, Eric's light bulb, I think, is really important in this conversation, which is if the person is low income and is eligible for a low income program, there's no citation fee. There is a requirement, if you will, to spend $10 on a Hop Fast Pass credit that is real fare that they can use. So there is that element, if I'm right, Eric, that also allows relief for a low income fare eligible individual, or frankly, honored citizen, and any other of the eligibility forms associated with that.
Director Esmond, do you have any comments?
How many people get free bus passes, roughly, in our system?
Well, so free not meaning those who are provided by their employers?
Yeah, I mean, if
We're talking about our low-income mitigation
low-income mitigation program. Number of tickets, it's about $3 million a year?
About $1.4 million. Approximately 6,000 people get bus passes. The vast majority of people get single-use tickets. So that will also be still in effect next year. We see the Access Transit, the short-term free fare, as being short-term emergency. So here's day passes or single-use tickets in small amounts. So that will still be available as well.
And there's still an appeal process for individuals under some of the categories where the machine wasn't working or.
Yeah, we will have administrative hearings for certain situations where, don't have the right ID, the pass expired, and they hadn't gone to work that month yet to pick up their new one. Those kinds of what I would call the fix-it ticket situation. We want to be able to address administratively.
I'm still thinking. So.
Yeah. So, this is a good conversation, and I originally came in thinking 75 was the right number, and I think what we've got here is a program that's very, it's well thought out. I think it will provide a lot of options. I think getting rid of the quote warnings is good, because that is, I suspect, really a hassle and puts a lot of people in an awkward position to make that call. So I don't want to overcharge people, a fine on the original the first time, but I do want it to be clear that we're serious about enforcing our fares, and that there is a consequence of not paying your fare. So probably at any one of those, 50 to 75 works. I mean, I think it does do it. The 75 does a better job. I heard a suggestion for 60, and I'm not by, I think it was the Opal representative, and I guess I'm just wondering if there's I think we're going to learn about this program as it goes on. If you follow me, I think as we start seeing the enforcement and how the warnings and how many are how many are first offenses, how many are second offenses, I could be convinced to go with a lower value. And obviously monitor this after a year and see what it looks like, and see and if we need to increase it to encourage more strictness in terms of the enforcement, that would. But I think all of these have, between the community service and the enrollment and the low income and the honored fare program, we've got some really good options here to address the concerns. So I struggle with one, so I'm looking for some consensus if we have one there. Lori, have you got?
I guess I'll say a couple of things. I worry a little bit that if we reduce it with the possibility of raising it later, that it's going to be harder to raise it later. I guess just in terms of bad reception by the public possibly. The comparison with other transit systems is certainly a justification for $75. Right now, it's presumptive, it's $175, but as a practical matter, I understand if you go to the court to pay or to object, $90 is what's typically imposed. So that also is kind of a benchmark. We'd be coming down from that effective number.
That was years ago before I saw the light.
Okay. So where are we? I mean, I think the staff needs some direction on this one.
I've got a quick, just a quick question and comment in regards to the work that the team did, and I appreciate all the work that's gone in this. But as we look at this data, we've seen the fare evasion go up to 14% in 2016, up to 13.1% in 2017, and we're talking about a current fee of $175. So fare evasion has climbed. Now, what we don't have is the data to say if the fare evasion amount was different, to know what it would have done, and maybe it would have gone back up to 20, but we don't have that data. And so as I look at this, I'm saying, well, we've seen fare evasion go back to up to a point where we were back in 2012, post the warning, taking off the warning piece of that, with the current rate at 175. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, is it really the value that really causes this sense of behavioral change? The other thing is as I look at the information provided in regards to the fare enforcement penalties compared, I mean, this doesn't really tell me much in regards to what are their fare evasion rates. I mean, it's great to see this, but the flip side of that is that, is Cleveland fare evasion up to 50% because they only charge $25, or is it comparable to ours? I mean, so that's bits of information that I don't have, and I'm assuming that the committee actually reviewed this. So I'm not going to make that determination or try and overrule what the committee wants to move forward. But as I look at this information, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about where I stand on this. But again, I mean, we're a board of lots of great minds, and where I sit is just a little different on this issue.
So I'll first maybe try and answer the question about the fare evasion penalties compared to other transit properties. And I'm not aware of any uniformity with respect to how different properties calculate their fare evasion rate. There are lots of different ways to do it. We like ours because we go on the system and ask people, and we think that's a true representation. But I think the answer, and Neil may know more about this, it really depends on how the system calculates their rate of fare evasion. And I think there's some systems that claim to have an exceptionally low rate, that I think if they did the surveys the way we do, they'd have a different figure.
What I would say is that ours is very high.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no question that ours is amongst the highest among our peers. In a conversation just last week with my peer in San Diego, they do surveys like we do. Maybe they don't quite, statistically may not be perfect, but their rate's somewhere between 3% and 4%. So the other piece of the formula to, I think, address some of your other questions is always enforcement levels.
Correct.
And so if you have, in their case, and I'm not going to remember the exact number, but it's over 100 FTE associated with fare enforcement. We have on the order of 15 plus our part-time use of inspectors. And again, your budget for this year included additional positions, and as you have heard from me, my recommendation would be that that continues a ramp up into future budget years as well, so that we begin to approach those same levels of enforcement. So in that regard, I think people will be seeing fare enforcement more, and there will be more citations issued until we see the behavior change on the system overall. And I do think it's really important. I think Board Member Baumann made this comment, which is that we can collect the metrics on this and really begin to see what effect this program is having, not just on the fare evasion rate, that will be really key, but also on the utilization of the program and its alternatives. And my sort of recommendation is not to consider any of these numbers locked in concrete, because it may be that we need to come back and adjust up or down depending upon wherever we land as we begin to learn how this program is utilized and is reviewed by our customer base. So, and we have that ability. There's nothing particularly hard about changing these things in future years.
I'd feel differently about the $75 if we didn't have a community service option for 4, and if we didn't have a low-income fare. And so, you know, I'm comfortable with what the recommendation is that's come forward for all the things that Lori has said and thoughts that I've had on this program, and all the people who think they chanced it. You know, well, they chanced it, but they could do community service, which doesn't require any money out of their pocket, just their time.
So based on this conversation, I'm back to the 75 where I was when I walked in originally, and unless we feel otherwise, I think we ought to move forward and direct staff to put together an ordinance with the $75
I agree.
in there. I suspect we will hear, and I'd like to hear some other input at the public hearing from folks about why that's an inappropriate level. And I mean, I think there's compelling arguments on either side, but I'm more compelled now by the deterrence and frankly the reduction from where we are today, and the number of options we have to mitigate this other than paying a fine. So unless we want to carry this on, I think we ought to let staff prepare the ordinance as they've recommended, and we will have an opportunity to visit this, I'm sure, in a decision-wise in January. Okay.
So it would be remiss if I didn't reference our own report that we did in regards to, you know, fair enforcement and the fact that minorities were, you know, going throughout. You know, it didn't say that minorities were targeted per se, but it did find that, you know, the way the fair enforcement was conducted post that, I mean, it was significantly harsher. You know, so as I look at this through my lens of equity, I'm challenged by the fact that the folks that have historically, unless we do right amount of education, right amount of outreach, you know, I'm significantly uncomfortable with the burden that we would be putting on the minority community, which we've done historically. And so unless we do something differently, folks, we're just going to get the same result. And so I haven't seen us doing much differently in that regard. So I can't say that I'm for this in regards to that initial amount. I'm still. I mean, we've got this is. I think the issue is multi-layered, and if we had addressed some of those other items, and Neil and I have talked about this, if we'd addressed some of those other items, I think I would be more comfortable. But we haven't, and until we do that, I can't be supportive of it. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Mr. General Manager, we want to move on to the next item?
Right, so thank you, Eric. I appreciate your work very much. Bernie, a very quick update on where we are with HB 2017, and then my hope is we can squeeze in at least the fleet direction strategy, and I think the other items, if we are in your packets, and then we'll have a further conversation, for example, with Finance and Audit tomorrow on the budget.
Well, I'll be very quick unless there are questions from the board. Just 4 quick updates on the House Bill 2017 initiative. We had our second meeting of the advisory committee that you added members to here today. Really good conversation. Lots of feedback and active participation from the membership, so they're very much engaged in the conversation. I think one of the issues that we're hearing about is bus electrification, and a lot of interest in that and how quickly that can move forward. The ODOT is working diligently on the rulemaking, so we're expecting that to come out a draft final rule early in the spring, and then final adoption in May. So we'll have time to make any adjustments in either the composition of the advisory committee or any recommendations between May and June, July. So we'll still be on track to get a proposal into ODOT in late summer or fall of next year for funding funding allocation. And I guess the last thing is just to make you aware of, TriMet is the recipient of all of the funds for the Tri-County area, not just for the TriMet district, but for non-TriMet areas of Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah counties. And so there is kind of a different role that we're going to have to play, and that ultimately the board will play in helping them craft a plan that is then submitted by the TriMet board on their behalf to ODOT. And then there will be reporting requirements that that TriMet will be responsible for in terms of reporting on how SMART is using their funds and Malala is using their funds. So it's going to be a little bit different. You'll actually sit kind of not as the TriMet board, but as the regional banker, if you will, for these funds. So just keep that in mind, and when I bring that back, you won't be surprised. Okay. Happy to answer any questions. Excuse me. So approximately, once the program is fully implemented, $50 million a year.
50 million a year for transit.
For TriMet. That's TriMet's portion. Yeah.
But how much does this hypothetical
for outside
bank?
That's an additional about $2 to $2.5 million.
2.5 million. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Very good. Thanks, Bernie. I wanted Doug to have a chance to review with you some of the upcoming decisions we have related to facilities and the fleet. These are really important in terms of the ability to roll forward service improvement plans. Obviously, bus service takes buses, and buses need to be parked and maintained and washed and all of that, and that takes space. And so there's a lot of intertwined potential changes to the fleet that I think it was important for you to know about, because we will be having some procurements moving forward that will be coming your way. So with that, Mr. Kelsey.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I'm just, I think you all have the PowerPoint available in front of you, but I'll move through this fairly quickly, conscious of time, and try and just stick to the key sort of strategic messages if I can for you. The first one is Bernie's actually just referenced here on HB 2017. We're really, I want to thank the team, Eric Hessa, Alan Lato, and others who've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes trying to bring this to life. There's a lot of considerations that we need to factor in here. It's the service levels, it's the capital levels, it's your what's diesel, what's electric, what's articulated buses, those longer buses you kind of look with the accordion in the middle, that are new to this market but pretty well known, as Bernie talked about at the strategic session. They're in place in a lot of other markets in North America. We have a fourth operating center. I'll show you in a couple charts where basically a center just like this is at capacity. Powell will have to go through a rebuild, etc. So I'll walk you through some of those numbers, as well as the human resource side of the implications, which ultimately are some of our funnel of our ability to expand quickly. It's a wonderful opportunity, but there's a lot of complexity that we have to make sure we deliver on. Just as a reminder for you, the ramp up, again, it's a 5-year ramp up for the new service. And again, it's factoring in the fastest ability for our human resources, facilities, and logistics, including getting those buses in that we can actually provide. So there's this lens that we have to factor all those variables together. A couple points I would just factor in here. Bernie talked about the $50 million, what's available once you take out low-income fare, the $2.5 million, etc. What do we have to work with here for the bus portion of our services, not rail, is about $30 million a year for incremental service. So in our strategy session, you can see that Bernie had covered off with you the different layers. Our base of growth, the incremental growth, which we had planned on about just over 2% a year, and here comes HB 2017. So how do we manage that, and what do the human resources look like, called mechanics in particular, that we've got a shortfall on, but we're going to need about 50 plus mechanics by 2023. So to do that, there's a pipeline of bringing them in, apprentices, etc. So we've got to factor all those into the realities of bringing this service to the street and to life. Key service impacts, again, over the 5-year window. As a reminder for you, 26% increase in weekly vehicle hours, 11,500. But that equates on 40-foot bus equivalents, about 135 additional buses, or 21% fleet increase. About 360 additional bus operators, so that's about just under a third of the expansion. And be another 50 plus mechanics, as I've already referenced. So to understand the bus expansion part of it, you have to get to capacity. What do we have in our inventory today, if you will, in terms of fleet capacity? The chart you have in front of you is, you'll see Center Street, and the capacity is what we have today. Any impacts during construction, not so much at Center, but when you get to Powell, you can see our decrease, because we have to basically, we need the space to redevelop the facility to get to the new place. One option we are looking at when we get to this fourth bus facility discussion here shortly is, can we in fact take all the bus fleet, shut Powell down totally, and potentially manage the temporary fourth facility to allow it to accelerate the construction up, and we can get back into service to actually take off one of the constraints about allowing expansion sooner and quicker on capacity. So yes, Powell expansion helps us, but we definitely need that temporary and long-term facility strategy to help us bridge the difference, because we'll be out of capacity once those buses start arriving in a few years. In terms of the facility capacity, the next bar chart, it does show you by year across the bottom the capacity for each period, where the shortfalls are as we overlay the demand side with the supply side of buses. But what you can see on the far right of the chart, where you get to the fourth bus facility, is we're getting close to 1,000 buses in this fleet now. And so we have buses coming and going, plus when you have capital construction projects. So we need to look at this not only for the fourth bus facility, but even longer. What does that longer parameter of sort of strategic asset management look like? The ideal world, where we look at the interim solution, it'd be great to have the one facility that you have enough property, you could come in, transfer your buses in, accelerate the Powell garage construction up if possible, and without having to pay the premium to do a temporary setup and then get to the long term. Without a larger one-stop shop alternative of a fourth bus facility, we'll be forced to develop this interim facility while we actually potentially go from a greenfield, if you will, where there's nothing there, to the long-term build. So it takes years to actually build these facilities. Some would say 8 years, some would say 6, maybe 4 to 5. I think so. It depends on the configuration we're looking at and then how we actually deliver that model itself. The scenario I've just put in front of you actually is reflective of the 40-foot bus scenario. To the degree that we electrify or accelerate electrification up, or overlay articulated buses, which I'll cover here in a little bit, that impacts that number and the fleet asset configuration on the property itself. Okay. In terms of the concept of, as we ramp this up in this scenario, there's sort of a few areas. So in terms of more frequency on the existing bus lines, that would be about 24 buses, or 38% of where the growth would go to. The capacity and reliability would represent an incremental 30 buses, or about 25%. Some route changes for 11 buses, and some span, which really gets to as we discussed earlier today, around the earlier and later services, about 3%. Then finally, some new frequent service lines, which is about another incremental 21 buses. So it starts to put this forward to you to show you the pie of what's getting allocated and what types of service. Electric buses. Actually, ironically enough, the leadership team had a presentation to it. There's a outside contracted firm who helped with King County up in Seattle look at their marketplace and electrification. So we retained them and said, look, let's leverage off what they've already done. And they gave us a brief update, our first glimpse of what it looks like for TriMet here, potentially in Portland. So we're in the final stages now. We just saw the first glimpse of it yesterday. They provided to us a range of economic scenarios. In fact, the range is actually quite wide. I think the numbers they gave us somewhere between 18 to 72%, if I recall, which is a really wide range. But it really the spectrum can really alter based on the premises you assume of the type of routes, the electrifications, slow charging, fast charging, things of that nature. So they can really skew the bandwidth of what the economics could look like. So we have a lot more work to do in that over a short period of time. They also provided a range of operating scenarios for us, sort of 4 key scenarios that saying which ones we think have a probability. So you start factoring this all in. Here's the first piece on the table. Now we've got to hone it down and get ready to own it more, if you will. The initial takeaways for us out of the review would be that slow charges is cheaper for capital and net operating costs. Now, with a slower charge, there are some facility implications where you actually need somewhere between the buses, the bus lanes of each facility, to actually put these little charging stations in. So when you accumulate it up, it's probably a lane here and there based on the number of lanes you would have in your facility. Again, the cost varies significantly across the key scenarios. Knowing we're still in a learning mode of a technology, I think as an industry, it's still evolving and shaping. We're not at a steady state here. I think it is expected over the next number of years, don't know what that years are, let's call it 5 to 7 range. The battery technology and the application is expected to probably increase. Will cost decrease? Likely so. As volume starts to grow up, you start to mature, then you probably will see a better technology application, probably for a more cost-effective way. The early candidate line. So part as we looked at the TriMet orbit here, we looked at focusing on shorter, less frequent bus lines that could be fully electrified with the technology that we know today. So examples, there are about 5 of them, the 16, the 72, 73, 87, and 89. The next steps we're undertaking here is to really get into the details, knowing we literally saw the report late yesterday afternoon. We need to challenge and make sure we're more comfortable with the cost assumptions that have been put in place. And then we need to come back and apprise you of, with your support, hopefully, of management's preferred recommended approach, and integrate it with the overall fleet strategy of not just the 40-foot base case scenario, but to what degree and speed do we want to electrify, and what does that end state look like? Because once you start, it takes about 16 years to turn over the fleet. Cause, typically a 40-foot cycle for life cycle for a bus is 16 years on a diesel today. So once you start, it takes that year to, as it serves its life cycle for each one. In terms of articulated buses, so some might say, why might we look at articulated buses? So there's many other transit agencies in North America run articulated buses. I think many years ago, a TriMet, in fact, had experimented with them. The technology today is pretty stable for its most part, so it's probably a great idea. I think it's a different time right now, and the marketplace is, it runs them everywhere very successfully with high reliability. So that's, I think, less of a risk today than it may have been earlier years back. So using articulated buses, it gets to overloaded trips, need more capacity to carry more passengers. Avoiding customer pass-ups, of course. More capacity with less risk of bus bunching, where the buses in peak service, they start to bunch together. And every time you can, the equivalent's about 1.5 of capacity to one. 140-footer plus takes about 1.5 worth of what you could handle. So the cost effectiveness, if you can handle those pass-ups, is actually quite good on a cost per passenger basis. The net cost in capital is actually higher to get into the game, not only for the bus, but for some of the infrastructure improvements you have to actually receive the bus, because some bus stops may not be adequate. Ultimately, what it should help is, as one of our really important goals, is to help drive ridership for this organization. And also improve, part of it is the customer experience, getting people where they want to go safely in a cost-effective way on their terms. So our intention here is to start introducing articulated buses into this marketplace within 3 to 4 years. It does take a number of years to get the infrastructure ready, the lines ready, the facilities ready, and then get the buses in. And the specific procurement strategy we would embark on. The candidate lines over the next, timing-wise, would be about 2 years. Individual lines, as I've indicated, they do need work. We have to go out and assess each individual line. So a little bit difficult for us today to say, we have the top candidate lines you can see in your presentation, but don't know which ones we would look to recommend to you in what order until we actually go out and assess the infrastructure implications. So some might be easier to get to the marketplace and put in service more so than other ones. But we will come back to you on that at the right time. The fleet impact would be somewhere up around 128 articulated buses from 2022 to 2025 range. And again, I think as I've mentioned, there are facility implications for longer length buses, etc. In terms of electric articulated buses, I think those are battery powered, available from at least one manufacturer now. More are considering it, which is terrific. Overhead wire electric buses run in Seattle and San Francisco. There is a high overhead cost to this, and also in markets where you have freezing rain, such as Portland, as we experience on MAX. When you can stay away from overhead catenary systems in a freezing rain environment, that's always a helpful thing for over the full year period. In terms of technology, hydrogen, I and others believe, has long-term potential, but it's still very much at the fringe, still not earned its way into a reliable system. I did when I was involved in the Olympics in Vancouver in 2010, we ran a fleet of hydrogen buses as part of a test a number of years ago, and great service, high cost, high breakdown frequency. So it's got to earn its way yet, but I think it's still on the fringes, and we are seeing a manufacturer to the bigger manufacturers actually testing moving hydrogen to the commercial application, but still quite a ways out. What I did here is over the next 3 slides, not to spend much time on it, but just to actually make this more in a 2D version of what does this overlay start to look like around this region. So you can see the potential enhancements in year 1, and I won't walk you through each of the legends, but you can have a look at that. And then you move to year 3. Oops. Year 3, you can start to see the expansion from 1 to 3 to 5, and that was really the intention here, is to start showing this, the more illustrative service improvements of how it starts to grow in all these different ways throughout the region, and what HB 2017 is going to do for the mobility of the region and the customer experience. But to do that is a lot of logistics and a lot of investment. To look also at the lift fleet strategy. So right now we've got about 268 lift cutaways. 5 more have come in this year. There's still opportunities to tailor the fleet to the need. What that really is code to say, we've got to work on how our yield management side of it. So we're making sure we get our customers picked up at the right time in the right place, but we want to manage the capacity that we don't have a 20-seat bus picking up 3 people. So there's an operating cost that we can be more cost effective there, I think, over time. An example of that actually is the just freshly arrived bus you see that just came in, I think about 2 weeks ago. We're going to be putting in service. That's the first of several where we're moving to some smaller buses, still well received in other marketplaces, and you're going to start to see those out on the street here very soon. And we want to factor this into the review of our overall broader picture, not just of the fleet, but how do we provide a great lift service to our customers in the future? The fleet is a component of that total service experience. So there's a lot of work that still it already is underway, but still a lot more work to be done. So there's a strategic piece to this, how fleet fits into the broader strategy of the next generation of service for that important group of customers. Beyond 2017, if we look at the rail side, and I'll just, for time, you can just see across the bottom of time of how the fleet and type has grown. But if you look at the far right, under 2021 range, you can start to see that we need to replace the Type 1s and also the intention to expand for Fairplex. We'll need probably another 8 vehicles there. So there might be, we'll still have to justify any extra spare ratios, things of that nature that might come with the fleet. But part of this is the rejuvenation of the fleet you're starting to see after the first 30-year cycle of some of the fleet, in this case called the Type 1s. The Type 1 vehicles, I won't spend any time on that one. I think there's probably a pretty good understanding of technological obsolescence, its actual performance that I spoke to earlier. It's strained, and it's holding back the net fleet performance. So happy to answer any questions on that at the end. In terms of the rail side of storage and maintenance, we have 2 rail yards to manage the fleets out of. The El Monica yard on the west side for 54 light rail vehicles, and Ruby Junction for 85 vehicles, totaling the 145. They're basically at capacity. So as more comes in, we're going to need to manage, reconfigure, probably on Ruby yard in particular, have to put some reinvestment in. And I think Neil McFarland had spoken earlier about some of the other one, the overhead cranes and other things that are some of the immediate sub-steps needed. But at some point with the vehicles, once you bring new ones in, you've got some of these existing type 1s you have to replace. So you've got 2 sets of vehicles. You just don't go to 0 in day 1. So it's a transitionary piece that will be important for us to have. Under West, commuter rail is 4 DMUs, 2 retrofitted historic RDCs. Again, long old vehicles, but they're built like tanks. They run, if you take care of them, they can run a long, long time. And again, on the West, no expansions currently anticipated in the expansion model. These RDCs are really to help us so we can get to the rebuilding side of maintaining service while we do so, rather than cutting it back. Overall, the future needs and next steps. The bus garage, we know there's a near-term need. Our team, the real estate team, a cross-functional team here in TriMet is working extensively on that. What does the near-term capacity look like, plus that long-term capacity, so we can get the buses, the expansion out as quickly as possible. Lift, fleet mix and location needs a deeper review, as I've indicated. The rail yard, we've spoken about that, and West is really stay where we are. And probably the key takeaway I would suggest is really there's a tremendous organizational effort, but also partners' attention to this to help us in our partnering around the implementation, particularly on the bus HB 2017 partnership side of it. So the strategic alliance side should not be underestimated, but happy to answer any questions.
Well, a lot of information there. For amount of time. Questions for Doug? I'm sure we're going to have a chance to dig into this a lot more in the future here. So thanks for the primer, I guess, and the kind of daunting outlook of what we need to do.
I do have one question. You know, in the new ATU contract, we have the opportunity to contract out refurbishment, mid-year refurbishment. How extensive is that, and how does it play into the fleet strategy? And specifically what sparked the question in my mind, you showed the type 1s with the high floors. In refurbishment, can you get rid of those high floors? You know, how extensive can you go?
Well, I think the type 1s, again, are not fully ADA compliant. So the great news as part of replacing the type 1s, not only for performance reasons, is they'll all be new floor or low floor vehicles like the rest of the fleet. So they'll be more compatible that way, which is terrific. In terms of the contracting out, I also think that historically the agency has done component rebuilds. It's never really been in the full rebuild side of the business where you take the train car out, you do it internally here, it's out for a week or months while they literally strip it down, rebuild it up, and whatever that list of things are that our organization, the team is working on right now, defining what should be on that list. What it will allow us to do is, one, avoid incremental capital to actually have to build that extension of capacity to actually be able to do the rebuilds with dedicated bays, if you will, and facilities. So that's a positive thing. It will also allow us to accelerate up the rebuilding of the fleet rather than hit and miss by components, rather than in some cases running to fail, and that's when you replace them to a degree. You can start to, I believe, it will help us significantly increase the overall performance of the fleet in more totality. So when they come back, they should be in a lot better state of quality. So there will be an acceleration up, and you move to more of a production line environment, which we should see cost savings, effectiveness, and when we get it back, it should be more of a turnkey product rather than moving in and out and having to shunt them around yards and such like that. So there'll be, I think, a significant productivity improvement for us and fleet performance improvement.
In refurbishing, can you install all the electronic bells and whistles that the latest light rail cars would have, or are you limited in addressing those kinds of issues when you refurbish?
I'd love to say yes, but sometimes there are limitations. There are some things that, actually we were talking about, Director Simmons had raised around the safety security on the system. So we talked about silent alarms, where a customer can touch a button sitting next to them. They just reach over and an alarm goes to the cab. It says, let's dispatch, not call 911. let's dispatch right to the operator, and the operator says, we're going to dispatch staff there to investigate that car at the next stop or two. So I think things like that we can overlay as new enhancements. Rewiring the fundamental electrical systems will be very selective, I think, because there's you've got to make sure that they all interface together. Right. And often the primary supplier, I'll call a manufacturer, like in this case Siemens, that we use for our Type 2s through 5s, they a lot of times now are assemblers. They're not building their own products for all the electronics and signals and doors, so they are actually a subcontractor out. So we would have to work with them or whoever would be the successful bidder on the business to figure out what is possible. Some things may be a very significant strip down and rewire that may not be worth our interest. So I can't give you a clear answer on every single component because we're still making that list, and then we'll have to ping the marketplace, if you will, and find out what their capabilities are and if we're comfortable undertaking that on a component by component basis.
Thank you.
So Director Prosser, I thought you were actually asking, can you make a low floor car out of a high floor car?
Well, that's where I started.
Yeah. and I think the trucks and the overall frame.
Correct. The design is fixed, so it would be, you can't really refurbish those, if you will. Yeah. So we need a new vehicle, like it'll be part of our procurement practice going forward.
Okay. All right. So are we going to defer the next items for
Yes,
okay.
And I would just note that there is the presentation on budget themes that has been worked through with the Finance and Audit Committee. So maybe if I could just ask other board members to take a look at them, see if they're a remodel, if you will, of what you've seen in the past, not entirely new. So we'll review that again with the Finance and Audit Committee tomorrow. And then bring back a final version. But if there are any comments in the meantime, please either let me, Dee, or your colleagues on the Finance and Audit Committee know, and we'll incorporate those as well.
Okay. So I think we're now going to the third floor again,
Yes.
Mount Hood Room.
Yes.
For an executive session, for those who can join us.
I can, yeah, I gotta go.
By the way, it's not about